Hey everybody, and it's JJ, and we're back again for another ASUS PCDIY hardware live stream. So we've got actually a pretty good amount of things to talk about. If you guys, of course, have been part of the ASUS PCDIY group or checking out our social media channels, you guys have seen some of the, of course, awesome product announcements already, especially with, of course, the latest generation of 40 series based graphics cards. So in this stream, we're, of course, going to be recapping the latest generation of ASUS ROG STRIX as well as TUF Gaming series based graphics cards, helping you see the latest generation in terms of the ID design and giving you just a little bit of a first look in terms of some of the cool design elements that we're going to have for these next generation GPUs. We're going to be talking about our latest generation mini PC with the ExpertCenter mini PC, the PN53, which is going to be featuring the latest generation Ryzen 6000 series mobile processors. Very cool, and that also is going to be introducing support for DDR5 and PCIe Gen 4. We've got a brand new monitor which is going to really pair up really well with these latest generations of graphics cards with an XG series monitor. That's going to be pretty sweet, where you're going to, of course, have 4K, high refresh rate, 1 millisecond response time in terms of the peak, as well as just some impressive color performance on that monitor. And then we, of course, got a brand new TUF Gaming power supply, which is also kind of really complementary to the next generation motherboards, new platforms, new graphics cards. So a lot of things to be able to go ahead and jump into. And of course, hopefully, if we've got enough time, be able to jump into some of the cool PCDIY Builder Spotlight submissions that we always like to be able to touch on in these streams. So let's see who we have joining us this week. We've got Johnny joining us. Hey, thanks so much for joining us here on the stream. The one, the only, Sue Min, thanks so much for joining us. We got Rick Harrison joining us here. Miguel Santana, thank you so much. Who else we got? Sniff, the one and only, the friend up north, Sniff Computer Design. We've got Yato as well joining us here. We've got Brandon Potter saying, I'm here for info on the new PSUs. Definitely don't worry, we're gonna have you covered there. And we'll get hopefully everything out there. So let me go ahead and drop out that music there. That's great. Okay, we got, let's see. Oh, all the way from Portugal. Very, very cool. Is that a 420 millimeter? No, that's only that's a 360 millimeter. No plans right now for a for anything bigger than a 360. Although we do, of course, have some new upcoming coolers coming in on the stream. Hey, Nelson. Erica's also fantastic to always have you here on the stream. Thanks so much for joining us. So let's get ready to go ahead and jump into it, guys. We've got a lot of things to be able to go ahead and touch on. Hey, Killatech, all the way from Romania. I think it might be the first time maybe we've had somebody from Romania. So very, very cool. So let me go ahead and first things first, jump into our big update here, which is going to be for UEFI BIOS updates. As always, you guys know I like to be able to try to give you guys any updates that we're going to have in terms of UEFI BIOS announcements, and we definitely do have actually quite a number of updates for this week. So specifically, the actual UEFI updates are going to be for Z690 series, pretty much predominantly. I think I've got the entire list, so I'll drop that actually in the chat, but I'll go ahead and show you what that looks like if you guys are interested. So we're going to go ahead and always just bring up one of our boards here for reference. So let's go ahead and bring up, I guess, Maximus Z690 Extreme. Actually, that's the board here right next to me that we can use for this reference. And so if we head over here, you'll see if we head over under the support tab, you then hover over to drivers and utilities. Although if you do actually have installed the My ASUS app, the My ASUS app does allow you to actually go ahead and check this information directly from within the app. So you don't have to go directly to a service and support site. So it's a great application if you want an easy way to be able to go ahead and kick off anything that's service and support related, or check for critical UEFI releases. We will hopefully be looking to introduce this functionality later within Armory Crate. Right now, Armory Crate does support driver updating, but doesn't necessarily always synchronize for UEFI BIOS releases. So you'll see right there, the latest release is going to be the 2000 series release. Now, we've already been what we refer to internally at what we call like feature maturity and functionality maturity, since I'd say actually even all the way back to about the 1400 series release. And between about the 1400 to 1600 series, we made some additional kind of fine-tuned enhancements to, I think, even further improve the experience when it comes to DDR5, especially in non-recommended configurations, which would be 2 DIMM per channel, 2 slot per channel configurations. But this is, again, a continuation that the big element here, especially with some of the prior gen releases, are going to be about enabling next generation Intel series CPU support. So that's really kind of the main benefit that you're going to have here, is formalized support for the next generation series of CPUs that will be coming out for Intel's next gen platform, but will be compatible, of course, on Z690 and B660 series based motherboards. So that's going to be the first thing, but there is also can be a little bit of continued kind of fine tuning and optimization that occurs in terms of that. In my preliminary testing, I'm seeing pretty comparable and similar overall experience in regards to kind of core overclocking experience. So again, if you've got a stable and reliable system, no need to go ahead and drop this in there. But if you're interested in, of course, updating the UEFI, then make sure to check out the FAQ document, which we always release in the community to help you better understand the things that you want to keep in mind when it comes to UEFI releases. With that, let me go ahead and drop this in the chat in terms of actually the total boards that we have here for the ones that have the UEFI updates. So give me 1 second here and I will drop that in the chat for you guys. And again, these will all be live, so pretty much just head over to the respective service support website for that model, and you can go ahead and download that corresponding UEFI release. All right. So I think I got the list over here somewhere. Yep. Okay. Very, very cool. And this is going to be 2000 series. Okay. Let's go ahead and drop that in the chat there for those that might be interested. So that is now in the chat. So it's a pretty long list right there, but that covers the majority of pretty much our boards right there, from the Extreme, the Formula, the Hero, the Apex, the Dash E, the Dash F, the Dash A, both the DDR5 and the DDR4, the Z690 Prime Dash A, the Dash G, which is our micro ATX, the Dash I, Mini ITX, the Creator board, the TUF Gaming boards for both Z690 and H670 ProArt B660, and TUF Gaming Z690 Plus Wi-Fi and non-Wi-Fi based models. So quite a number of those boards are covered there. So let's see quickly here if we just got any other kind of quick questions before we get ready into our next topic. We'll be discussing Thor 2 power supplies. Nothing new in terms of updating, so we don't have any reason to touch on that. I'll touch on terms of our general PSU landscape when we talk about the TUF Gaming series power supplies, so that include the Thor 2 series as well as the Loki series. I might touch a little bit actually on some of the next generation Strix models, which will be our Strix Aura based models, but no new immediate updates. Pretty much we've already touched on this previously, and there's actually posting inside of our PCDIY group. But the Thor series, the next model should be our 1600 watt, which will probably be released next month. Then we'll probably be following that with the 1200 watt, and then the last model that will be released will be the 850 watt. Okay. We need ATX 3.0 on the Thor line refresh. That is something that we're already planning for, but keep in mind it's not very critical because right now, in terms of the overall power supply design and the topology, the Thors 100% have no issues in terms of being able to meet the demands of a modern-based platform. We've already done validation with not only the current next-generation series GPUs like the 40 series graphics cards, but also Intel and AMD next-generation platforms. So you can be very confident that you're going to have a great experience in that regard. So you don't have to worry about that. Okay, so very straightforward in that regard. Where is the Radeon that was leaked in previous stream? There was no previous Radeon. Actually, a lot of people made a mistake on it. Let me see if I can grab it here. I was just doing a little bit of testing actually for our upcoming X670 based stream because I was going to be doing some stuff, but this is actually the card. This is a 6650 XT, so it's not anything new. It's a card right now. You can buy it if you wanted to. It's a great graphics card, but it's not anything new. So let me leave it right there. Looks pretty cool. There you go. See? A lot of people are more familiar with the triple slot bay design, but because the 6650 was quite efficient, it still has a really big, large, robust VRM heatsink, but it is just a more kind of entry-based card, so it's not as many people are familiar with this card. Okay, so let's go ahead and keep looking. Will there be information on the GT502 release? GT502 probably going to be looking for more information in October. We've already briefed on that, and we'll definitely have a dedicated live stream on that model. And I did also update that we'll have actually a different color for the GT502. So make sure to go ahead and keep it tuned in that regard. Let me just quickly go see if there's any other questions that quickly came up in terms of the UEFI BIOS. So Stardust is asking, is it absolutely necessary to rename the BIOS file in order to use it? You actually do not need to rename the file. We actually have a video on our YouTube channel that walks through the entirety of the process, but all you need to do is download the file and extract the file. If you take the extracted file, that file will immediately be able to be used within the Easy Flash utility inside of the UEFI BIOS. You only need to rename the file if you're going to use the USB BIOS flash function. So that would be if you're going to put it like on a flash drive, and then you're going to install it on the USB port, and then use the USB BIOS flashback feature, then you will need to rename the file. But otherwise, you don't need to rename the file. Hey, Fighting Irish. Oh, happy to have you. I think that's the first time also from somebody all the way from Ireland. Fantastic. Thank you for having us here. All right. Any news on the X670 pricing before? No, we will only be talking about pricing on the actual embargo release, so make sure to keep it tuned. Amika had a question about, I believe, the Z690 formula. I'm not sure if I caught your question, so if you can go ahead and let me know what that question is, I'll do my best to go ahead and answer it. If not, feel free to go ahead and tag me inside the ASUS PCDIY group, but we'll get ready to go ahead and jump into it in the not too distant future. Okay? All right. All right, so let's go ahead and keep moving things along here. Give me 1 second. We'll get into the next item right here. So I think next up, let's go ahead and get ready to actually talk about, I think, pretty much one of the newest items, which is going to be the new GPUs, right? So for those of you that, of course, didn't watch our first look preview live stream, we already have a first look preview live stream. So this will be maybe a little bit of a recap for some of you that are already aware, but we, of course, have two brand new series of kind of ID designs that are in alignment with with NVIDIA's latest generation based graphics cards. So we've got the ROG STRIX GeForce RTX 4090. And then, of course, we have the TUF Gaming GeForce RTX 4090. Now, in total, we're actually going to have 6 cards because, of course, NVIDIA made an announcement in regards to the 4090 as well as the 4080. And the 4080 comes in 2 variants with a 16 gigabyte variant and the 12 gigabyte base variant. And so the ID design is pretty much going to be fairly similar between all 3 of the cards. So regardless of whether you're taking a look at a TUF Gaming graphics card or you're going to be looking at an ROG STRIX based graphics card, the main difference is going to be in terms of the dimensions. So dimensions would be the thickness of the card, how many slots, and then the length of the graphics card. And again, you can get all this information in the first look preview live stream, as well as in the featured post in the ASUS PCDIY group. But with that, let's go ahead and quickly take a look at these cards. All right. So let's go ahead and bring up the ROG STRIX 4090 right here. So here we've got the card. It's featuring, of course, an entirely brand new ID design. I think it's a really cool looking ID design in terms of what we've done. We definitely made a little bit of a more departure from our prior generation. It still has a very clean and refined aesthetic. You know, we've seen some people that have actually commented in terms of what they refer to as kind of more box type design, but I would tell you actually take a look a little bit actually at the design philosophy here. So a lot of people actually really liked the quote unquote box design that you kind of see a little bit more kind of on Founders Edition series cards, but really it takes a lot of effort. But if you notice here, we actually have kind of these rounded corners. So there's actually no hard edges like you would traditionally actually have with a box in terms of the overall design. We also went for really a focus at maximizing the overall thermal performance right here, because we wanted to be able to ensure not only, of course, we maintain the focus of cool, but also quiet operation. And so with that, we have an entirely brand new redesigned thermal solution here, which is using an advanced vapor chamber design, which we actually have an entirely new type of design that's patented, where we actually have integrated the heat pipes into the vapor chamber plate, which helps to maximize its overall efficiency and effectiveness. And that will be actually exclusive to the ROG STRIX card, and it won't be present on the TUF Gaming graphics card. But the TUF Gaming graphics card, rest assured, is still going to have a really great thermal design. So let's go ahead and just kind of pull out this card a little bit more and kind of see how it stacks up in terms of the overall kind of total design. So here you can see the overall design aesthetic for the card. In terms of the horizontal profile, you're going to have that nice kind of little bit of RGB light bar that's going to be right there, and then you're going to have a 4-zoned RGB lighting design that'll be present, which I think is going to look really, really cool. You then have the front facade. Now, I would expect that we'll probably see a little bit less of vertical orientations this generation. The majority of people, of course, install here with a horizontal orientation, and in that regard it would be an entirely neutral based design. So keep in mind here, if we take a look at this card in kind of the horizontal field, even though you do have these kind of fixed colors that are right here, you would have essentially a neutral based card. There's not going to be any colors to contend or compete with your build at all. But the reason why I say that in a vertical orientation here, where we do have, I think, a little bit of a bolder design, which I think looks dynamic, and we wanted to try out something that was a little bit different, is that you have to account that the cards are going to be even a little bit bigger. Now, in the prior generation, generally the biggest cards that we had, if you took a look at, let's say, like the 3090 Ti was a 3.2 slot card, and the biggest Noctua card was actually 4.3 slots, which is even bigger than this. It generally would be more limiting to find some chassis that can accommodate those larger type of cards in a vertical orientation. So I'm not sure how many people are really going to be able to do a vertical orientation, but I think it still looks great. You'll also see one of the hallmarks of the new design implementations here on the card for this generation, which is going to be larger and thicker and higher performing fan blades. So these fan blades have really, again, been focused at not only having really impressive performance in terms of static pressure, but airflow. It's an improvement from our prior generation that we have, and that works in concert, of course, with the totality of that big heatsink design. When we take a look here at the back of the card, you've got a really cool aluminum base backplate design here, with large massive venting that we have on the card, which I think is really cool. It's got this really kind of cool aesthetic right here, where you have, of course, the ROG iconography and the typography that's there. The ADC, in case you're wondering about like what's the ADC 10 thing, it's actually because it's ADC 10 aluminum alloy, which is a very high quality aluminum alloy, which is utilized here for the backplate. And then from there, you can see the cool kind of RGB design aesthetic that we've got on this card with 4 points. So there at the top, you would also have it from the side and from the bottom, and that'll actually create a little bit of this cool kind of trailed effect that I think is going to look really interesting. Now, we don't have kind of animations here to show you, but I really think that once we actually get to the launch, you can get to see actually how that lighting pattern looks. I think that it's not going to seem super aggressive, but it's going to definitely add a nice ambience to the build, which is pretty cool. Okay, of course, right there, you're going to have your new updated PCI Express 16-pin power connector. You've got your dual V BIOS implementation, of course, a performance and a quiet mode. At the launch, we will then be talking about all the specifics in regards to like the TGP and TBP, so like board power ratings and some of the more specific differences between TUF Gaming and ROG STRIX cards that people kind of always wonder what's the difference between the cards. But historically, for your reference, ROG STRIX cards will always be generally clocked higher. They'll have higher board route, higher PCB power topology design. So like on this generation, I can tell you that already the ROG STRIX card will have a higher performing VRM design than what we have on the TUF Gaming. Both are outstanding, very high performance based VRMs, but this is going to be like a 24+4 base configuration on the STRIX card, and then on the TUF Gaming, it'll be a 20+4 base power design. And then also, like I said, there'll be differences in terms of the clocks, and then there'll be also differences in regards to the TGP, TBP ratings that you have on the card as well. Okay, there's a little bit of an angled kind of look at the graphics card. Another little bit of an angled look as well. And keep in mind that another update for this generation compared to the prior 30 series, that this shroud is pretty much all metal. So the card has a really high level of rigidity that's present here, really designed to mitigate any type of torsion and really be able to have a solid experience. All the cards will come included with a GPU anti-sag brace. And also for those of you that might have an older power supply, it will come included with a 16-pin to PCI Express adapter cable inside the box. So even if you have like a current 1000-watt power supply, you can take that adapter cable and adapt that to work with your PSU. Okay. And here on the back of the card, a cool little bit of design difference as well between the ROG STRIX card as well as the TUF Gaming graphics card is these have right here. This is the 4-pin the 4-pin fan connect 2 headers. So those you can go ahead and connect auxiliary fans to the card and then have those respond to the GPU temperature. These right here actually are bracing points. So you can actually use this to directly mount this against a chassis. So many chassis actually have the ability to actually have the graphics card braced directly from those endpoints. So there's it's like a little bar, and that bar can essentially be locked in between the chassis and that back end point. So if you kind of want a cleaner design in terms of bracing the graphics card, this is actually commonly used by some of our system integrators, not so much by users, but as a user, I can tell you it's a very clean design as opposed to having to have like a brace. But some people like having like a brace or something like the Herculex or the Wing Wall because aesthetically it also looks kind of cool to have that in there. So entirely up to you in that regard. And then here we finish it out with that cool kind of angled design. There you can see again where we've got 2 zones of RGB lighting, one zone right there and one right there. And again, in this kind of traditional horizontal profile, I think it's got a really clean, actually overall refined design aesthetic, focused on course on being cool and quiet and entirely color neutral in that respect. Okay, so that is going to be the the ROG STRIX card. Again, we'll just go ahead and maybe show just like 3 different little shots of it right there, so you can kind of get a perspective of it. And we'll do a side-by-side in terms of the TUF Gaming graphics card. Before I go into the TUF Gaming graphics card, I'm gonna quickly see if there's any kind of questions here that might come up for the ROG STRIX that I can go ahead and dive into. Keep in mind, of course, we are still under performance embargo, so I can't get into any kind of specifications in terms of more like clock speeds or things like that, or even pricing information or anything like that. So let me see. So Andreas is saying, I wouldn't run less than 1600 watts for a 1300K in an RTX 4090. So actually, Andreas, I would actually say that's not correct. Our recommendation for the power supply is actually going to be pretty close to NVIDIA's rated recommendation. So the recommendations right now already from NVIDIA are 750 watt and 850 watt. Do keep in mind that in the prior generation, there was definitely a higher peak transient response. And we actually talked about this ourselves when we communicated this in our designs for our like Thor and our 30 series based graphics cards, right? But NVIDIA has really worked very actually diligently to be able to improve the overall transient performance that you have in terms of power for 40 series. And so actually it's quite a bit tighter than what you would have compared to the 30 series based cards. So our recommendation take, for instance, is actually going to be closer to 850 watt to 1000 watt in terms of your standard power supplies. Now, as always, when you consider total power envelope for your system, you do want to consider, are you overclocking your CPU? Are you overclocking your graphics card? How much, how many fans are you running? How many storage devices? Everything accounts for a certain amount of a power envelope, but you don't have to be super concerned in terms of having to go to, a massive power supply upgrade just to be able to support these GPUs. The more important thing will actually be accounting for the power adapters. And as I noted, the STRIX and the TUF Gaming graphics card will come with the adapter cable. And also for users that have bought our current ROG STRIX or our Thor series power supplies, we will actually have a buffered amount of adapter cables that users can contact us to get that cable as well. So there will be options in that regard, okay? So let me just see. I'm not going to be talking about any overclocking chia or anything along those lines, so you'll have to go ahead and just kind of keep it tuned in terms of that regard, okay? All right, no other graphics cards and no series to be able to go ahead and talk about. So anybody asking me about any other variants, I don't have any information to be able to let you know about that. So just make sure to go ahead and keep it tuned for that. Zataka asking about pricing for Europe. Again, no pricing to disclose until we actually get closer to the launch date, okay? Paskowitz is asking, are your 40 series PCBs similar? So no, we have an entirely different PCB topology. So as always, we're going to continue to coordinate with water block partners. So everybody, from EK to Bits Power to Fantex, all of our partners that we work with to be able to ensure water block interoperability. STRIX cards pretty much along with FE cards tend to lead the industry in having the broadest water block support, and we expect to maintain that for the ROG STRIX 40 series of graphics cards, okay? So let's go ahead and take a look now at the TUF Gaming based graphics card, okay? And again, I know there was a lot of questions that might have popped on there. Again, if you have your question and I didn't get to it, feel free to just go ahead and drop it again, and I'll do my best to go ahead and get to it if I can. All right, so next let's go ahead and take a look here at the TUF Gaming card. TUF Gaming card is going to be very similar to the ROG STRIX card. The ROG STRIX card, I didn't note it, that was a 3.5 slot. The actual TUF Gaming graphics card will be bigger. The TUF Gaming graphics card is a 3.56 slot based graphics card, so it is going to actually be larger, but it's actually a little bit shorter. So dimension wise, the ROG STRIX card is a little bit longer, and then the TUF Gaming graphics card is a little bit shorter. So you're still talking though definitely over, they're both over 340 millimeters. So keep in mind in terms of the overall length of the graphics card, you're still fine if you have got an ATX mid tower or definitely a full tower. But if you're considering maybe something in that more kind of small, ultra compact type of chassis, then you're going to definitely want to double check to ensure that dimensions will be able to accommodate the graphics card, okay? You'll see that we maintained a very much focus on having a color neutral based design here. So it might look black, but it's actually closer to almost like a silver. It really looks great with our TUF Gaming, our TUF Gaming motherboards. You'll see one of the actually new additions right here is the iconography and the design language that we did also introduce in the 30 series, where it's got the vector design language. We did go to a new 3D embossed kind of RGB design that we have on here, which again, subtle on TUF Gaming. It's really only 2 accent points, one here and one here. And so that allows you, whether you're vertical or horizontal, to be able to show it off. It has a ribbing bracing design, which helps to even add more rigidity to the card, so it feels really, really solid. Helps to, again, mitigate in terms of a torsion on the graphics card. Of course, 16-pin power connector, and then metal as well on the shroud, and then also in terms of the back plate, and then a triple fan design, very, very similar in that regard. So if we go ahead and go to our kind of 3-shot right there, you can see it kind of from that horizontal profile, from the vertical orientation, and then the back plate. I think they look great across the board. I really like the overall design here that we've got on the back plate. I think it has a really cool kind of design aesthetic where it goes from the back plate to then the actual large vent section, and we still have maintained that TUF logo, which I think the TUF Gaming logo, which looks pretty cool. Same thing in terms of the fans for this card also, where we've got the larger, thicker, higher performing fans that are present in here. Dual ball bearing base fans also for high level of reliability when it comes to the overall cards too. So overall, very, very cool cards. You can maintain, of course, that expectation of cool and quiet operation. From a thermal performance perspective, though, there will be a difference if I go back here to the actual heatsink assembly, and we'll dive into this very much specifically when we get into the launch live stream, but there is a difference in terms of the vapor chamber design. So here, actually, this card has one more heat pipe than the ROG STRIX card, but it doesn't have that new patented vapor chamber-based design. So the ROG STRIX card is always designed to have even a higher performing heatsink because it generally has a higher clock speed, right? So it's a balancing act of wanting to not only give you higher thermal dissipation performance, but also complement the thermal solution with the overclocked or the kind of the higher operating parameters of that graphics card, right? So you just want to kind of keep that in mind, is that that's a little bit of a difference. But regardless, it doesn't matter which card you're going to get. I'm telling you, you can be very confident that you're going to get a cool and quiet experience from these cards. So really, really nice in terms of that regard. And so there's a little bit of an angled design right there, a little bit of another angled shot, and there you go. So that is going to be the TUF Gaming graphics card. And again, the connection here is going to be the same. So you've got your 16-pin that'll be present on here, just like on the ROG STRIX-based graphics card. And again, this one will come included in the box with the adapter cable to allow you to adapt the 16-pin to your 8-pin PCI Express power connectors if you're going to be utilizing an older power supply. Okay. And let's go ahead and do just a little bit of side-by-side right here. So let me go ahead and combine these. And again, I will jump into the comments to see if we have any questions that I can touch on. So give me 1 second there. All right, and so let's see what makes sense here. I think there you go. That's maybe a little good comparison. So right here, here you can kind of see a little bit of the kind of the side-by-side, right, between the two cards. So here you've got the ROG STRIX card. Here's the TUF Gaming graphics card. And so here's kind of like the horizontal, although technically in a horizontal, you wouldn't even see this little bit of this kind of angled shot, right? And then here you've got the vertical orientation, right? So that would be the two graphics cards. And again, these designs are going to be very similar to what you would have on the 4080. On the 4080 16 gig, it'll pretty much be just about identical in terms of the overall kind of dimensions and the overall design. On the 12 gig, they'll again be very, very similar in terms of the overall design, but they'll be a little bit different. So take, for instance, like I think the smallest card will be like 3.15 slots versus, like I said, 3.5 slots, right? And then dimension wise, as far as the length of the graphics card, I think the smallest graphics card is 305 millimeters compared to something like 357 millimeters. So there's gonna be a little bit of difference in terms of the clearance considerations as well, okay? All right, so let me again go back here to comments. Wow, there's a lot of questions right here. So nobody's saying is that there's still no LC version. So we're only talking about these cards. We'll be monitoring feedback. And of course, as you guys know, we generally do offer different kind of models over time. So as always, just make sure to go ahead and keep tuned to the future for any kind of future announcements that we may have when it comes to our GPU kind of product line and our series of graphics cards that we have. And definitely we're going to be monitoring feedback from users in terms of what they're interested in terms of kind of card designs or things along those lines, okay? No commentary, like I said, if we're going to have a white, I know that we've maintained a very active kind of focus on developing white-based product offerings, right? We really have right now the most comprehensive white product portfolio with white chassis, white motherboards, white graphics cards, white headsets, white keyboards, white mice, white power supplies, you know, white AIO coolers. We really have, I think, the biggest white ecosystem of any component manufacturer. But right now, within these two models, these are the only two models that we have to just show, okay? All right, let me see right here. Any new PC cases? Nothing new, although we just did, of course, launch the the AP201, and then we also, of course, launched the, announced the GT502, right? So let me see right here. I think I can show you the GT502 and the AP201 if you're not familiar with this. AP201 would be a good choice potentially for this on the smaller, like the 4080. 12 gig, because that could fit in there. This will actually fit up to a 380 millimeter. So you can actually get the AP201 in both black and in white. Very cool chassis, very focused on airflow. Because it's also micro ATX, it'd be a great choice even for our next gen high performance based system, where you could put something like our Dash I or our Gene series base motherboard in there. So this is the AP201. And then we'll have upcoming in the not too distant future, we'll have the GT502. And the GT502 is our new split chamber design chassis. Very, very cool chassis. A lot of functionality, a lot of flexibility that you'll have available for this. And this one, like I said, be coming probably in around the October-ish, late October-ish time frame in terms of another offering that we'll have. And then of course we'll still have the GT501, and we'll also have, of course, the GX601, or the Helios as people call it. Okay. This mic is no longer available, so you don't even worry about it. Don't worry about asking. Will there be an ATX version of the GT502? Right now there's no plans for a smaller version of the GT502. Just see right here. Woos is asking about Demon Slayer laptops. We don't cover laptops in this stream. We only focus on PCDIY components. If you want, you can email me, pcdiy@asus.com, and I'll see if I can check. But to my knowledge, the only Demon Slayer products that we're releasing for North America are component products, and we've already released those. Overclocking information for melted cheese. Just make sure to keep tuned for the launch live stream where we'll dive into all those points, okay? So Spirit Dragons, what's the difference between the TUF cards and the Strix cards, right? So I talked already a little bit about that, but again, we'll go in a full deep dive when we get to the launch live stream. But again, to clarify, your kind of main differences is one is that the ROG Strix card features the patented vapor chamber based design. So if I can show you right here what I'm referring to. So this is actually a new type of design that we have here on the card, where you'll see here's the vapor chamber plate, and here you can see that the actual heat pipes have been integrated within the vapor chamber plate, right? So it's a new type of milling process where we've been able to go ahead and maximize that type of design. So historically, you wouldn't be able to do this. You would actually be bonding at the top, and this can actually affect the way that the heat pipe structure works and its overall efficiency. So this is a new type of design that's been specifically implemented for the ROG Strix series, and it will not be on the TUF Gaming series. As I also noted, there's a difference in terms of the overall ID design, the RGB implementation. There's going to be a difference in terms of, like I said, the power topology, the VRM design, where you've got a higher performing VRM on the ROG Strix card versus the TUF Gaming card. Again, here though, that won't affect the core experience. You can be confident that you'll be essentially seeing the same performance that you would from like an FE type class card. And then there's generally historically differences in terms of water block support. ROG Strix cards generally get the broadest water block support. The ROG Strix card has the Fan Connect 2 headers, and then there's usually a difference in terms of TGP and TBP ratings that we have on the card, but we'll have more information on that when we talk about it at the launch, okay? Is the ATX 3.0 PSU going to launch with the 40 series? So I'll be talking about our TUF Gaming power supply in a little bit. That TUF Gaming based power supply will be an ATX 3.0, and will be kind of somewhat in a launch and alignment. We'll actually be talking about the launch for that, but our availability for probably the TUF Gaming power supply will be sometime in or around probably November-ish time frame, okay? David's asking how many 8 pins will the adapter connect? There'll be, I believe it's 4. So it's it's essentially one 16 pin to 4 8 pin there. Okay. All right, very, very cool. If anybody has any other questions on that side, feel free and let me know, and again, drop those in. But that pretty much covers us for these next generation series based graphics cards, okay? So next up here, I wanna go ahead and touch on the brand new TUF Gaming ATX 3.0 essentially based certified power supplies. These are gonna be a new update to our current TUF Gaming power supplies. So we move all the way up to 80 plus gold, cybernetics based, enhanced, and certified, and the range is gonna be improved. So here's 750 watt all the way up to 1200 watt, and these will also have the native 16 pin base cable that are going to be present on here. So let's go ahead and take a look at these power supplies, okay? All right, so overall design on these are going to be pretty cool. You can see that in terms of the overall ID design, it definitely has a little bit of a different design than our current one. So we've updated these with the new kind of TUF Gaming vector iconography, right? And kind of design language that we have there. I think it looks really cool. You'll see also we're maintaining that focus to kind of improve the overall internal topology with a little bit better heatsink design. This won't be as advanced as what we're going to offer like on the ROG STRIX or the Thor series, but still very, very capable. And you know, you're getting a really cool, solid quality power supply. So you can feel confident that regardless of whether you're going kind of for a more mid-range type build or even an enthusiast build, the TUF Gaming power supply can definitely be the backbone of your system and be able to ensure a stable and reliable experience. Now, some of the cool things that we're going to do here in terms of the overall design, you might be wondering about, well, what else are you going to kind of maybe be bringing to the table, right, in terms of the power supply? There will be a couple of things that we've done. So one is the actual PCB. So the PCB does actually have a coating. What you may not realize is that over time is that, of course, you can have ingress of course, dust, debris, dander, even kind of humidity, things like that. That can potentially cause actually damage sometimes to the PCB. And so actually having essentially this coating that's present there can help to mitigate things like actually potential short circuits or other factors that can be influenced, like I said, from the dust, debris, dander, humidity, things along those lines that can actually settle on and kind of affect the PCB over time. So that is going to be kind of one key upgrade there is going to be that PCB coating that is present on there. We're also going to, of course, have a high performance 135 millimeter base fan that's going to be on here. This will be a dual ball bearing fan, so very good in terms of its overall lifespan and its overall reliability. And of course, also from an acoustic perspective, we definitely are tuning these to be able to ensure that you have a very quiet level of operation. Now, in terms of the overall design here for the PSU, you'll see that this is going to be a fully modular based PSU. But let's go actually over here to this shot. I think this is a little bit better. And you'll see that this is going to give you, of course, tons of connectivity for, of course, all your devices, including your graphics card, your motherboard. You're going to have that 600 watt PCI Express power connector that's going to be included. You'll see that it's an etched kind of semi-sleeve cable design that's going to go in there. Now, our ROG Thor power supplies are very premium and they come with individually sleeved cables. We'll be detailing more information later on as far as the exact kind of cable configuration. I can let you know here, this already will be the cable layout that we will have in terms of what will be available for the actual card. So if you want to take a look right there, that's actually what's going to be coming, and those are going to be the respective lengths that we will have for the power supply. All right, so you can see motherboard cable, of course, your dual CPU, your PCI Express cable, then your additional kind of PCI Express cables, right? SATA cable, and then peripheral cable, right? So that's going to be for like SATA SSDs and then Molex-based devices, so like certain controllers and things along those lines. Excuse me, SATA cables here, and then Molex. So Molex usually gets used for like certain controllers and things along those lines. All right. And so again, that power supply will be coming in a range in terms of 750 watt, 1200 watt. I don't have pricing yet for you. So if you're wondering about pricing, I can't tell you about any pricing. It hasn't been finalized yet, but we will be getting ready to release these, like I said, probably in about the November, mid to late November timeframe. And this will be really one of the first ATX 3.0 based certified power supplies with the native 16 pin. Now keep in mind that our Thor series power supplies, they're not going anywhere. We are currently already have our Thor 1000 watt. We'll then be shipping our Thor 1600 watt probably next month in terms of availability. And for those that want the 16 pin based power connector, you will then still be able to get those available. Either they will be like kind of a what's called a running change, where they'll be coming in the box at a later date, or you'll be able to reach out to our service and support team and be able to get the adapter cable supplied to you if you're a Thor PSU owner. Okay. And so here's overall the page. I'll go ahead and share this in the chat if anybody kind of wants to see a little bit more information on it. But overall, I think these will be a very popular choice and really pair up well for not only next generation builds, but next generation based graphics cards. Okay. So pretty sweet. Let me go ahead and drop that in the chat there. So let me see. Probably with the switch to 12. You know, somebody, I think maybe the question I see there is asking maybe a little bit about kind of like 12VO. So you have to keep in mind that 12VO is still, it's a specification that was pretty much first and foremost designed for kind of, I would say, pre-built kind of systems, not necessarily DIY systems. In DIY systems, there's actually still certain devices and in terms of maximum interoperability that can benefit from 3.3 and 5 volt. So right now it doesn't necessarily make as much sense in terms of going to a pure kind of 12V based power supply configuration, and platforms where you can kind of control everything and ensure that you don't have to worry about any type of interoperability or devices that rely on those, or even sometimes auxiliary microcontrollers, because keep in mind sometimes there can be microcontrollers you put onto a motherboard that also may utilize those other rails. So it's not purely just from the perspective of what the motherboard needs or what you can have kind of working coordination for the CPU and the motherboard, right? There are kind of other factors to evaluate when it comes into that. Okay. All right. Min Tran, is this real time? Yes, this is real time, right? So on ATX 3.0 specification, I wouldn't be overtly really worried about it. Again, we've already done testing with our current generation power supplies that are non-ATX 3.0. Power topology and overall design is actually more important in some regards than just saying that it's ATX 3.0 spec. When you talk about things like an incursion performance, some of that, which is, like I said, based on prior generation GPU things in terms of transient response, isn't necessarily as much as a factor now with 40 series, because there's been redesigns to how those cards work in that regard, right? So again, you have to look at kind of your system from a holistic perspective and really figure out what is the demands of your system and how you're going to be running your system, right? We have a question on when the Loki SFXL PSUs will become available. Probably in October, mid to late October, we'll probably be launching the first Loki SFX based PSU. Okay. To see any other quick questions that might kind of come there. Let me go ahead and just move out some of those other kind of irrelevant commentaries that we're seeing from bots there. Okay, don't think we have to worry about anything else. If I see any other questions, let me know, okay? All right, sounds good. All right, so I think next up, we're gonna go ahead and touch on our next item here, which is gonna be the ROG STRIX XG32UQ. So this is actually a pretty cool monitor. I'm very excited about this monitor. This is going to be a 4K, this will be a 4K HDMI 2.1 based monitor, but also high refresh rate. So it's really going to hit actually to be, I think, a great option for those of you that would be evaluating something like a 4090, 4080, or actually even many 3080 based GPUs. So you're going to have, again, 4K support, fast IPS-based display, 1 millisecond peak performance in terms of somewhere on that panel being able to operate at 1 millisecond gray to gray, 32 inches, so it's a nice big size monitor, and up to 160 hertz in terms of the actual refresh rate. It does feature the new ID design too, so it's all black, and of course the slim bezel design, and this does also support the desk mount kit. So if you guys aren't familiar with the desk mount kit, I'll show you that in a little bit. But definitely is a great option, not only again for kind of the current generation GPUs, whether you're talking about 30 series or 40 series, but also maybe if you're on a console side, because of that HDMI 2.1 support, it's a great option that complements that as well. Do have G-Sync compatibility in here, so if you're wanting to run adaptive sync support to be able to smooth out the gaming experience, that is present. Now this is going to be an HDR 600 base certified monitor, and even if you don't run HDR, I think the main benefit that you have with having a higher performing panel in this respect is that the actual minimum SDR brightness on this is going to be generally much brighter than what you would have for a traditional monitor. So if you probably check your current monitor, it might be somewhere maybe around like 200 to 250 nits unless you've invested in a higher performing monitor. So even under an SDR based experience, you'll definitely have a punchier or brighter base panel, which I appreciate, especially when you talk about kind of immersion and kind of just having a little bit more punchy colors to be able to kind of experience. And definitely color performance is great here. This unit actually is going to be 130% sRGB, and it's factory calibrated, so it comes straight from the factory so that you can have really solid color accuracy outside of the box. That's actually something consistently offered on our ROG series based monitors, right? Connectivity, you can see again there, dual HDMI 2.1, 1.4 DSC. That's going to be very much the same kind of specifications that's offered on either 30 series or 40 series. You have a USB hub that's integrated in there, and you also have a line level jack out for either speakers or headphones. All right, and of course you get all your cables inside the box, and you are good to go in that regard. Let me go ahead and show you here the ROG desk mount kit. And for this one, for people who might be like, well, hey, what's the price on this one? This one, I do actually have pricing for you because we are getting ready to actually release this into the channel very shortly. So probably availability for this, you'll probably see pop up online, I think probably in about the next 2 weeks or so. Could be a little bit longer than that. It's a little bit variable. Pricing for the ROG STRIX excuse me, XG32UQ is going to be $869 USD, and then for our friends up north in terms of Canadians, it's going to be $1129 Canadian. Okay, so that is going to be your price. I will drop that there in the chat in case anybody's wondering about the respective price point there. Okay, and then let's go ahead and take a look at that ROG desk mount kit. And I'm also going to touch on display widget, which is one of my favorite features. If you're not aware about it, it's a really cool level of functionality. But here on the ROG desk mount kit, if you want to add this to the monitor, it's a really nice level, a level of flexibility to be able to give yourself more screen kind of real estate or space on your desk. So you can see that you can actually mount the monitor and then have a C-clamp design, and then you can free up all that space for your desk mount, for your keyboard, for your mouse, to have a really nice kind of clean gaming setup. So the cool thing too about the way that our desk mount kit works with the monitor is you still have an ergonomic adjustment. So if you wanted to still kind of adjust the monitor, that's still accessible when you use this kit. And the kit's not very expensive. You can get it actually right now on Amazon. So this is going to be supported on this monitor. Another cool thing about the XG32UQ is going to be that the XG32UQ, if I didn't show you, does also integrate our tripod mount design. We call it tripod, but really what it is just the actual quarter mount connection that you have there. So you can actually see right there at the top, there is actually a threaded mount, and you can go ahead and connect there a mirrorless camera, a light, you know, really anything you want to the top. You could even put a multi-bracket like hot shoe if you want to have a light and a camera, or a microphone and a camera, or a light, a microphone and a camera. You can have actually a lot of flexibility to be able to position that however you want. So that is a nice kind of update that we've been starting to offer on more and more of our ROG XG series based monitors, is that tripod based mount design. So overall, very, very cool. The last thing here is going to be this display widget functionality, which let me see if I go ahead and bring this up. If you're not familiar with this, the cool thing here with display widget is this is an application that you can launch inside of Windows, and it will allow you to go ahead and customize elements like the brightness, the contrast, sharpness, shadow boost, and you can even use what I call app sync, which is really cool because you can actually profile applications to specific presets. So if you wanted like your browser to open up an sRGB mode, but then you wanted to open up Apex Legends or Destiny or Halo and have a specific kind of preset for your game, you could then have it automatically enable like shadow boost or adjust the contrast or the brightness per games. And you don't have to physically then touch any buttons on the back of the monitor. So I'm a really big fan of that. It's a great feature to offer on the XG series monitor. All right, so that is going to be the XG32UQ, and that will again be coming in at $869 in the US, and then $1129 in terms of Canada. Okay. Let me just go ahead and see here. Somebody's asking, is a 1200 watt, I guess prior generation PSU going to be an issue for a 4090? I wouldn't see any concerns. As long as your PSU is from a reputable manufacturer and it's running well without any issues, and you have good quality cables, then you shouldn't have any issues in terms of ensuring that. Again, like I said, the transient response performance that is right now already been communicated by NVIDIA is superior for the 40 series. So actually in terms of kind of the peak power load concerns, it's actually overall less of a concern than 30 series. So you can 1200 watt is going to be more enough. Even with a heavy overclock configuration, I wouldn't be worried at all. Okay. Somebody is asking about 27-inch 360 hertz. Yes, so we will have eventually the PG27AQN, which will be our ROG Swift 1440p 360 hertz monitor, but no new updates on that monitor right now. Okay. Update on NX Blue switches for the Flare 2 Animate. Haven't popped up anywhere. I think actually we did get a small assortment. Gabe, if you can go ahead and tag me in the ASUS PCDIY group, or you can email me pcdiy@asus.com. Tagging me in the group would be preferred. But I will check with our PM team to see if I can check on availability. I think the last they told me, they said September we should have them, and I think we pushed them out. We don't bring them in that much of a quantity because, to be honest, the demand is fairly low. Demand is much higher for linears and for tactile based switches than it is for blue switches. But it should either be by the end of this kind of month, which we're almost there, or moving into October. So if you haven't seen them, you should be in the not too distant future. I don't know if you're also outside of North America. If you're outside North America, it might not even be brought in your region, and you would have to check with ASUS in your region. Okay. Oh yeah, Branko's asking, can you explain the Strix Hive to me? Sure, Branko, I'll touch on that before I get into the mini PC. So give me 1 second, I will touch on that specifically, but I'll get into that just because that'll take a question. Somebody's asking about a PG32UQX with HDMI 2.1. If it did come with HDMI 2.1, that would be an entirely new monitor. We have no plans right now to change the current PG32UQX. HDMI 2.1 is not really a key requirement in terms of enabling the experience on that monitor. I think for sure there would be some users that would love to have it on there, but right now we don't have any immediate plans in terms of updating that monitor with HDMI 2.1. Okay. We will still do have plans to release the PG32UQ XE, which will be kind of a model that be positioned underneath the PG32UQ, which will still feature mini LED, full array local dimming technology, but at a lower price point than what you have with the PG32UQ. But I don't have any release information for you in terms of the timeline for that monitor. Okay. GB's asking any information on next-gen Intel. Make sure to keep it tuned. You'll see announcements coming for Intel next-gen platforms in the not too distant future. All right. Stardust, I answered that question regarding the PG32UQ XE. Greg Peck is asking about specs. Which specs are you wondering about in terms of for which models? If you're talking about the GPUs, we can only release the full performance kind of embargo information actually when the embargo launch occurs. Okay, so you'll have kind of that complete information, and we will have a full focus live stream to align with that. So again, we will kind of be recovering them in full in-depth in that regard. Okay. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get to the next question, which is going to be on the Hive, asking about how the Hive kind of works here. So give me 1 second, and then next we're going to get into the mini PC here. So give me 1 second here. Do I still have my images? I think I hopefully still have my images here on the Hive. X670E. All right, so... do I have, okay, yes. I only have one image right here that I have loaded up. Actually, oh, but I think I have it actually if I go in the PCDIY group, so I can bring it up in our group in a second. But for purposes of what you're asking, this should still be fine. So this is the actual Hive. So this is a breakout box. So pretty much for this model, so let me actually also go ahead and I guess bring up the X670E. -I board. So this is our mini ITX based board. Okay, so all right, so on this board, and then where do we have? We have Hive. Okay, so I'm just trying to make it a little bit easier, hopefully for Bronco to understand, because they're asking me about this. So I want to try to hopefully make it a little bit easier for you to understand exactly how this breaks out. So there we go. All right, got the two images here for you. And so on our mini ITX based board, traditionally you would have usually like some type of audio design that's on here, but because of the dual kind of chipset, the size of the socket, many other factors, it was quite challenging. So we decided to kind of go with a different approach specifically for this generation based board. And so we actually moved the audio solution entirely externally. So the audio solution is actually built into the Hive. So the Hive connects to the system like you would have like an external USB DAC. Essentially, that's the same type of design, but you actually have more functionality. So this connects to the rear of the motherboard via USB-C. Once it actually connects there, you then also have USB pass-through that's also available to you. But there's going to be other elements, like you have a debug LED design. So the debug LED will allow you to see information that normally you would have obstructed because you can't see on the inside of a mini ITX based build. It's pretty much all blocked off. You'd have the ability to have one-touch options for enabling things like PBO. You have volume and mute that you can also do. There's a flex key button which can be mapped for different functions, including things like a safe mode type boot, which the benefit of having like a safe mode boot, it would be like having like a semi-clear CMOS function, right? But it's more focused at just clock speeds as opposed to having to clear out all your profile related parameters. Say for instance, like fan parameters, right? Which you would have to go back and dial in if you did an actual clear CMOS, right? And then you also have the USB BIOS flashback functionality, so that if you then connected like a flash drive and you wanted to do the USB BIOS flashback, you don't have to physically do it at the back of the board. You can also do it through the Hive. We are also evaluating whether or not we may be able through the low-level firmware update it to maybe be able to implement potential fan control, but this is something that's still under internal review. It's not guaranteed, but it is something that we're assessing. And if that does become a feature that we can introduce, we will of course release that as a firmware, so that kind of software update, and we'll let people know about that functionality. But that is actually what the Hive is all about. So the Hive, in short, is an advanced way to be able to have access to a high quality audio solution, and also have kind of more functionality in terms of monitoring and managing your system, specifically your mini ITX based system, right? And another improvement that we did make within the Hive is also the inclusion of an ASUS Saber DAC and amp that normally wouldn't be found on ROG STRIX based models. So normally ROG STRIX based models have our Realtek based audio codec, and we usually put in like a supplemental, maybe kind of amp like a Savitech amp, and we have audio grade capacitors. But here the audio solution is actually a little bit kind of closer to what we would offer on our higher end ROG Crosshair series based motherboards, or our Maximus series based motherboards, which will feature the audio codec plus an ASUS Saber DAC and amp. So hopefully that helps to clarify the Hive functionality for you. Okay. All right, so let's go next into here, the mini PC. So let me go ahead and bring this up here. And actually, do I have this one here? Hopefully I have it up here. Give me 1 second. Yep, here it is. Okay, and this, let me just get this up. This is going to be the ExpertCenter. And we'll drop this link in there as well. So this is a pretty cool unit. I'm very excited actually about this model. This is going to be the ExpertCenter PN53. So this is going to be kind of really one of the most high performance mini PC options that is going to be out there. It's kind of in alignment with our also latest generation Intel based mini PC. So we recently introduced that with the PN64, which is going to be featuring 12th gen series. CPU support, while also incorporating DDR5 and PCIe Gen 4, right? So here now we're also kind of doing the same thing on the AMD side, where you're getting that latest generation Ryzen 6000H series based processor, which is going to be even give you that newer microarchitecture, right, for faster performance. There's a higher actual power envelope that's afforded to this CPU, and then on top of that, you still get all those other really cool things that we already had in the prior generation for the mini PC and AMD, where you had already those Radeon graphics cores. You had support for actually up to 4 displays, which is really cool. You get DDR5 for more even bandwidth, and then you also are going to get the PCIe Gen 4 support. And this unit has quite a bit of flexibility in that regard. So in terms of the actual kind of I/O, it's super rich, up to 7 USB ports that you're going to get there, 2 Type-C ports. You can actually support display signal over the Type-C. You'll also have our integrated ASUS AI noise canceling, 2.5 gigabit LAN connectivity, Wi-Fi 6E that'll also be present on here. In terms of the drive support, it's pretty cool because there'll be up to 3 different drives that can be put into this mini PC. So you can either put 2 M.2 base SSDs and then optionally a third SATA 2.5 inch base SSD. So a lot of flexibility in this small little unit to be able to pack in not only tons of storage, but then that complements the very high performance that this unit has available to it. When we talk about the specs here too, keep in mind, this is actually pretty impressive. If you talk about the different configurations, if you actually check the CPU configurations here, let me see if I can bring up the actual spec page for just for reference if kind of you were wondering about like a Ryzen 6600H or a 6800H, but you're talking about very performant based cores. So here, if we bring up AMD's page, so this is like 6800H, you can see you're talking about 8 cores, 16 threads, right? That's quite impressive in terms of the overall performance. And again, a higher default TDP than you would offer on kind of on the more entry-based Ryzen kind of mini PC-based solutions. So it's definitely been designed to give you quite a bit of performance in that respect, right? And then along with that robust storage, again, PCIe Gen 4 support for your SSDs, right? Your 2.5 gig and your Wi-Fi 6E based networking. I also am a really big fan in terms of the flexibility that you have in terms of powering the unit. So in terms of the powering of the unit, one of the cool things right here is this supports actually PD power input. So that actually means that you have the flexibility. You don't have to power it via the DC. So if you want to pair this with one of our monitors that has USB power output support, you could have a single cable that would be powering the mini PC and also be providing the display signal. So it's a really kind of cool, clean, integrated experience that you have afforded to you on this model. And I know there's sometimes people always kind of this debate trying to understand DDR4 to DDR5, but one of the really cool things within the mobile space is because there's no overclocking pretty much, the dynamic of understanding the benefit to DDR4 and DDR5 isn't doesn't kind of come into the complexity that you have within a desktop platform, where people try to compare overclock parameters with overclock timings and different types of configurations to standard JEDEC values. On pure JEDEC values, DDR5 pretty much is always going to win DDR4, because the baseline for DDR4, you're going to be at 3200, right, with CL 20 base memory, and then versus your baseline of 4800. And the CL timing, because of the same bank refresh, the double the burst length, right? Also the improvement in terms of the actual channel addressing, all of those things will guarantee that DDR5 always performs better. And it actually even also performs better in only a single DIMM configuration versus on DDR4, which tends to be a little bit more limited if you don't run it in dual channel configuration. This is why laptops, even in this generation right now, which are shipping with only one single DIMM in DDR5, are showing such good performance, because it's actually a much more efficient and performant based architecture than DDR4. So really the long and short of it is that because you don't generally deal with overclocking DIMM configurations, you get the benefit of having lower voltage, higher bandwidth, and higher densities, which is really cool for these mini PCs by moving over into DDR5 support. So overall, a really, really cool unit. Again, you can see up there, like I said, 3 different drives can be configured. That cool kind of configuration flexibility of being able to power the unit with a single cable, be able to tie that up with, like I said, a monitor that we offer, like our PA or V series based panels that offer that, I think is going to be pretty cool. And last but not least, we have a brand new thermal design on this model, which is pretty cool. The thing I like about this is going to be that we actually have a new type of anti-dust self-cleaning system. And this was actually brought over from our laptops, where we actually have, you can see kind of there's an isolated channel there. And the channel helps to actually separate kind of dust, debris, and dander, and helps to get expelled or kind of pushed out of the system, so that it doesn't necessarily settle inside of the fan hub assembly. So it's a pretty cool kind of little design that we have there, which is beneficial, kind of like a mini PC. If you're going to kind of stick it somewhere, you don't want to worry about it, it's nice to have kind of this type of design. Now still, I would normally recommend maybe once every year at least kind of blowing it out if you really kind of were concerned, but you know, we have increased the overall thermal design here in terms of being a higher performing design with a copper plate and a heat pipe, a larger high performance finned based module, right, which connects to the actual thermal assembly and the thermal solution, and then along with that higher performing based fan solution and that self-cleaning design really just gives you a better overall thermal solution, right? And the cool thing too here that we also did add on this model is that you now do have more fan control options inside of Windows. So if you want to be able to kind of toggle between different profiles, you can do that pretty easily. So that is going to be the PN53. Sorry about that. All right, so let me go ahead and just see what other questions we might have gotten in there before we get ready to go into the PCDIY Builders Spotlight. All right, so let's see here. So Greg, I guess you're asking still maybe about the specs for the graphics card. Rest assured, once we get to the embargo, we can fully disclose kind of all the exact spec information right there. As always, we feel really confident in what we're doing from an overall design perspective. And so, like I said, I will cover, you know, the PCB topology, the heatsink design, you know, the TGP and the TBP based information, and all those kind of really gold points. But, you know, I think that we've shown consistently, really, especially with the ROG STRIX cards, that they kind of really lead the crop in terms of the overall design experience on our graphic when it comes to graphics cards. Taru is asking, is when ATX 3.0 be launched globally? You know, that's a kind of complex question because it really depends on regions. Different regions have different timelines that they bring in different types of products that align kind of with not only the pricing of the market and user demand and other kind of factors, right? All I can tell you is that for us, right, you know, our ATX 3.0 PSUs that will be launching, the TUF Gaming model will, at least in North America, kind of be launching probably in around mid to late November. And then our Loki series might be a little bit earlier than that, but those are SFX based PSUs. So they're not necessarily designed kind of for normal base builds. They're designed for more compact, smaller base builds. And then our Thor power supplies, I would say that if you're looking at ATX 3.0, even though it doesn't meet ATX 3.0, I would still consider those because they're going to offer even quieter experience than what you would get in ATX 3.0. And the power topology is very high performant. You just have to utilize an adapter cable. But, you know, up to you in terms of how you want to break things out in terms of which power supplies you want to evaluate and consider. All right. Don't think I see any other questions right there. So That's an interesting question. Radion's asking about the PA32UCG versus the PG3UQX. Which one's better in quality? Quality is the wrong way to talk about it, right? Because quality, if you talk about just overall kind of construction and build quality, is pretty much comparable. They're both extremely high-end base panels and extremely high-end base monitors that are going to be very high quality. The PG series, though, compared to, let's say, the PA series, because it's our ProArt series, has maybe more little stringent requirements in terms of sometimes even the color accuracy, as well as even kind of maybe uniformity policy. But they're both very, very high-end panels. They both come factory calibrated, very high-performing base metrics. And they're also intended for different audiences, right? Like you're going to have a different type of backlight, even the operating of the full array mini LED backlight technology is different between the PA versus the PG. And of course, then there's differences in the refresh rate. So I don't know that I would review it based on quality. It really comes down to what is the core functionality and the specifications you're looking for, and then kind of deciding whether you would want to go for more of the ProArt, which is designed really for creative professionals, right? So people that are doing animation, videography, photography, right? Things along those lines, versus the PG, which is definitely first and foremost focused as a high-end gaming monitor, but then could also still be used for purposes of content creation, right? All right. That motherboard that you have by you, is it new? No, this is our Maximus Z690 Extreme. So this is it's a fairly new base motherboard, but it's not super brand new, right? Our latest generation motherboards that we're going to be new are going to be our upcoming X670E base motherboards, and of course, in the not too distant future, we're going to have our new upcoming Intel next generation base motherboards, which are going to be pretty exciting as well, right? Okay. All right. I think overall that covers that. So I think next up, let me just see right here. So Kevin's got Steve has a question there. Date of the mini PC release. I would probably say we're going to, that model, it's still a little bit TBD, but I'm probably thinking about November timeframe. Right now, we're just getting ready to push out some of our other mini PCs, but we'll definitely have a little bit more information when we actually get to the release, along with pricing. So if you watch kind of our streams every week, I usually will break down the difference between kind of a general announcement, so like the TUF Gaming power supply, and then also this mini PC is a general announcement, as opposed to like when I was talking about the monitor I even gave you the price and kind of the expected availability. So I will then update in kind of future streams, as well as post on our PCDIY group to let you know when we're actually going to be releasing those products. Specifically in terms of mini PCs too, we also have generally two types of configurations. There's going to be our bare bones, which would mean that you would pick the CPU, but then you install your own memory, you install your own operating system, your own storage. And then we have pre-builds, which are the same mini PCs, and you still pick the CPU, but it will come pre-installed with the operating system, an SSD, and a certain amount of memory that would also come included. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Michael saying, are there going to be power draw issues? We use a GPU adapter that comes? No, I mean, we've already tested that on our side. And again, NVIDIA has already, I think, detailed that information. Again, you always have to keep in mind that as long as your current PSU is operating within its rated specifications and you're using correct cables, everything is fit and fitted correctly, then you shouldn't have any concerns in terms of using an adapter, right? Think about that actually, like right now, a lot of people already use adapters, and even very stringent and exceedingly high power demands. Not a lot of people kind of keep in mind that when you use actually an adapter, so let's say right here, I even just do an extension. So I've got a nice extension right here. This is a 24-pin power extension, or I use an 8-pin power extension that commonly used get right now in current power supplies. You actually reduce efficiency by using an extension altogether, and tons of people use them already in builds. People use streamer cables, right? People use extensions for customization. You're already using an extension cable, and you're pulling massive amounts of power through these, and people are already running them. Now, of course, there are better quality extensions than other extensions, right? So the overall validation and the quality and the design is important in terms of that cable that you're utilizing. But as long as the overall cable that's being utilized is correctly designed, it's it's correctly fit in terms of its overall connection, it's fit and flush, then you shouldn't have a concern in that regard. So there shouldn't be that much of an issue in terms of being mindful of that. It's kind of somewhat similar there to extensions. Ideally, right, when you talk about efficiency, a native cable is going to be superior than an extension, right? But as it's already been seen, you can definitely use an extension and you can still have a stable and reliable experience, right? All right. Okay. So overall, I think that covers that. So I think let's get ready to jump into, I don't know how much I'm going to have here in terms of the PCDIY Builder Spotlight. So let me go ahead and see if we got anything by that. Will there be any difference in terms of, so interesting, somebody's asking about PCIe Gen 4 versus PCIe Gen 5. Well, the 40 series are not PCIe Gen 5, they're PCIe Gen 4 based graphics cards, so that's already been confirmed by NVIDIA in terms of the launch details. Do keep in mind that PCIe Gen speeds actually really don't matter that much for graphics cards. I know that there's a lot of focus on it from a lot of users. We get a lot of users that ask, like, how can I run my graphics card at by 16 and do I have to run it at by 16? It's actually really not that critical. You could run it at by 8 and it doesn't really matter. Even PCIe Gen 3 really does not limit cards. If you actually really kind of understand the way that the actual pipeline works for PCI Express case graphics, it's all about getting the graphics card to get that information and then work with its cache and its memory, and so its VRAM. Once it gets loaded in there, there's not a lot of consistent data that's being hammered across the PCI bus. It's more kind of the entire pathway and how efficiently that's getting to there. But especially also with improvements in terms of efficiency and encoding and many other kind of factors, really bandwidth is not really that critical. You're generally not saturating it. Now, in some specific types of scenarios, maybe like in a GPU compute type of accelerated workload where you're heavily saturating the bus, then you could potentially see a benefit. But from a gaming experience, for most users, it's really not a factor whether you're talking about PCI Express Gen 4, by 8 or PCI Express by 16 on Gen 4, or even again, if you went back to Gen 3, and Gen 5 is really not that much of a factor. Gen 4 to Gen 5 will be a much bigger factor for storage. And even then, you would argue that the storage experience, it depends on how you utilize the drive. So of course, if you benchmark a drive sequentially where you're going to be saturating it, you need the bandwidth. But if you really talk about the normal nominal kind of queue depth of 1 and normal kind of workload that users have for read and write, a lot of that actual bandwidth, it's underneath 1 gig. And so that means sometimes you're actually talking about throughputs that are close to SATA based speeds, right? And this is why if you actually take a look at a lot of times at like gaming performance, so like installing patches, loading games, launching games, the performance between a very high-end drive and a lower-end drive is actually not that big. And that's because you're not really saturating it. The big difference generally comes much more with users that heavily saturate drives. So this will become in more dynamic workloads. Imagine maybe like a photographer that's doing like heavy batch conversion of like 150 raw photos, and with each photo being like 50, 60 megs, right? Or dealing with really big, swaps back and forth, or transferring one file set to another file set. Things that are really being much more dynamic. So that's a factor. We'll also see how direct storage plays out in the future in terms of that, but you'll see a bigger gain when you talk about kind of storage benefiting from PCI Gen 4 than you would, PCI Gen 4 to PCI Gen 5 than you would necessarily base graphics. Okay. All right. All right, so I think that goes ahead and covers that. So let's go ahead and get ready to jump into the PCDIY Builders Spotlight, guys, here. Will the ASUS crosshair formula be compatible? Yeah, so any current generation motherboard, doesn't matter whether you're talking about Intel or AMD, if it's pretty much been made, in the last like 5+ years, it's going to be fully compatible, right? It depends all on, what's the performance that you're looking for your system, but I would really say you wouldn't be concerned. Most new generation graphics cards also perform best usually with resizable bar technology, but still that's really kind of been present on motherboards that are going back even about 5 years. So I'd say really kind of anything within the last 5 years is quote unquote really kind of compatible, right? Whether or not it will give you the maximum experience, that's a different question. Depends on kind of the performance of your system, right? But overall, it's not something you have to be super concerned with, okay? All right, so let me go ahead and bring up our first PCDIY Builder Spotlight here. I think this is going to be black and white satin from Jeremy. But I think this is also, I think they have a name, Rhino. We'll see in the actual submission form, but let's go ahead and bring that one up here. And again, if anybody has any other questions that they have, feel free to go ahead and drop them in there. I'll do my best to go ahead and get to them. If I didn't get to your questions, as like I said, it's, you know, there was a lot of different questions that kind of might have come in and out there, but if I can get to it, I will do my best to get to it when I can. All right, so I think this, yeah, this is going to be from Jeremy, and I think also this is from Rhino Rigs, right? So let's go ahead and take a look right here. All right, so black and white satin. Interesting name. All right, and let me go ahead and bring up his images here. Ooh, interesting. Okay. Oh, I remember this build. Okay, yeah, this was a cool build. Okay. So let's go ahead and see here. So we've got a little bit of an angled shot right here. We're going to see, I think overall, this is kind of what we would refer to as a white themed base build. Pretty cool looking build. Some really interesting stuff here. You don't normally see people actually kind of braid or strand cables. So that's kind of an interesting approach. I'm going to see, it'll be kind of cool to see how that looks when we kind of pull all the way from the back. But we can see we've got an ROG STRIX 30 series graphics card, white edition, ROG STRIX white edition power supply. I have an ROG STRIX kind of white silver theme series motherboard. So this is probably our Dash A base motherboard. And then we've got a kind of complementary hardware and then a little bit of that black in there for contrast. But overall really cool. I really like the red though that's in there to serve as a nice kind of contrast color block to the white and silver and black that we have in there. So let's go ahead and keep kind of looking at this. Ooh, so lit up right off the bat, we've got a pretty cool design right here. So this is actually a really cool overall aesthetic. So it's also got right here, this is the ROG STRIX Scope TKL. This is actually using the ROG NX base switches, the Moonlight White edition. It's a perfect kind of combination for this chassis. I do actually like this design. It's pretty cool. I'd be a little bit concerned on whether or not that stresses the cable a little bit, and I wonder if there's any kind of measurable impact in that. But assuming that it's past all your stability concerns, it's definitely got a little bit of a cool aesthetic and something that's different. And I think it's kind of smart to use that here because since you don't have a shroud to cover this, it at least gives you something a little bit kind of cleaner to look at, right, than you would have traditionally with just kind of having that bunch of cables, and you would maybe try to wrap it and then kind of pull it in tight and have it go clean. So definitely a nice job in terms of the overall cable management. Very clean, nicely done there. So looking here at the rest of the system, nice overall routing right here with nice real clean cables with these nice combs, keeping that all nice and tidy. Love the overall just nice, smooth and simple, nice runs right here for the actual water cooling. This is kind of my type of loop. I don't like overtly kind of complex loops. I like, if I want a loop, I just want it there to be able to benefit from the water cooling performance, maybe add a little bit of an aesthetic. So sometimes some people definitely go crazy, nothing wrong with that. But for me, I tend to kind of favor a kind of more simpler narrative a lot of the time. I also like this split design where, you know, our cords are already cool and quiet. Why add the complexity and take away from sometimes the aesthetic of the card by adding a water block to it? So here, this is kind of cool where the CPU gets the benefit, don't worry about the GPU, and then just have this kind of simple run and layout. And I like that they didn't actually cover the DIMMs. A lot of times you get people and they'll run kind of the tubing over the DIMMs, and I think that takes away a little bit. Also added this in here. The only one that I would argue, and I don't know that you need it in there, and it's not even an argument, is whether you need this fan here in the back. It's not super critical, and it does take away a little bit from sometimes adding a little bit of shine right here to the logo, but it still helps to add a symmetrical kind of feel to the entirety of the build. But overall, really, really clean and nicely done in terms of the overall aesthetic. When is the ROG Loki launching in the US? Hey, James, I did already note that a little bit earlier, so probably be looking to be able to release that model sometime in late October. We'll have a formal announcement in the PCDIY group and also here on the stream once we actually have exact pricing for that model and when we would expect it in terms of channel availability. But right now, the rough estimation is going to be sometime in kind of early Q4 timeframe. Okay. All right. So that is going to be overall very, very cool build here. Here we have some other kind of shots, a little bit of an angled shot right there. Very clean. Jeremy did a fantastic job. Rhino Rigs here, man, nice thumbs up. I like the way this turned out. This is a cool looking build. And definitely nice job here, especially when you don't have a lot of kind of room to make this very clean, especially in this type of chassis layout. So let's go ahead and take a look at his submission form. So give me 1 second here. We're going to go ahead and bring up their submission form. and see, let's see if we keep a couple images there. So maybe, there we go. That's kind of cool right there. So let me go ahead and bring up his submission form here and see what he's got going on. All right. So in terms of the submission form, let's see. This is going to be from Jeremy, Rhino Rigs. You guys can check them out on, I think it's on either on Facebook or on Instagram. So in terms of the theme, it's an all ROG setup done in black and white and silver. And then 3 words to describe the build was clean, cool, and crisp. Does the build have a name? Black and white satin. In terms of the core hardware, we've got an ROG STRIX Z590-A gaming motherboard. We might have an ROG STRIX 3080 10GB white edition. Then there's also an ROG STRIX 850 watt power supply that's in there. He's got an 11700K CPU. Hopefully he's taking advantage of our ASUS AIOC technology on that motherboard along with the water cooling. Should definitely offer some nice kind of per core overclocking that's there. He's got then the Corsair Dominator Platinum memory in there, 3200 MT. 2 1TB PCIe NVMe M.2 SSDs, and then a Corsair Hydro X RGB kit in terms of the kind of the core water cooling hardware. Then Formula Mod cable extensions and black comb cable mods, cable combs, excuse me, that he's using right there. In terms of, I think somebody asked about the chassis. So chassis, let's see here, is going to be, is that? You see right here. Yeah, it's a Thermaltake Core P6, and then of course he's got the Corsair LL120 fans in there, rounding out the kind of the RGB lighting, right, that he has in there. Even though he's not using RGB, he's just got it set to white, right, which looks quite nice. What aspect was he most proud of? He was the most proud of the custom loop, as this was his first attempt at hardline tubing. Man, thumbs up. Nice, clean job for the first attempt. But you also made it not overtly complicated, although I give you credit. Instead of going with like a simple distro and just running it kind of like a straight like run, you did add a little bit of flair and give yourself some kind of nice little curves there that add a little bit of character and add some nice visual layout. So I definitely agree. For especially doing your first run, nice job. Having the PSU with the braided cables looks awesome, and he was really happy with how that actually turned out. Is there anything that he would change about the build? There's a few different setups that I'd like to try. Install the PSU shroud and mount a sensor panel to it. That could be pretty interesting. Remove the front intake fans and the bracket, giving off more of an open concept look. That could also be pretty interesting. And water block the GPU and mount it vertically and extend the loop. I'm not sure if I would be a biggest fan of that. I think that that would take away from some of the cool depth and contrast. If I was to water cool it, actually I would go for more of a waterfall drop effect and keep the actual card in the horizontal and then just drop that line straight into there and then run that out straight to the side. I personally think that would look kind of cool, but you know, with a lot of white here, if maybe you went with maybe kind of an interesting dual color, that could kind of be interesting as opposed to keeping it all red, maybe a white and red coolant. So maybe have one kind of for the GPU and then another for the CPU. That could be kind of interesting, right? Not sure if I could bring myself to pull this card apart though. It's way too nice for that. I would agree. It's a great looking card. How long did it take for him to build the system? About 10 to 12 hours. And then what does he use the system for? He uses it pretty much for gaming. So a few games that he's been playing recently are Far Cry 6, Assassin's Creed Valhalla, and Red Dead Redemption 2. Hopefully maybe checking out that brand new Cyberpunk, man. Cyberpunk with the new 1.6 update. Looking pretty sweet, man. And let's see. Favorite ASUS feature or function is he's a big fan of actually the ability to just integrate everything through Corsair iQ and ASUS Aura Sync because of that integration that we do offer. So overall, man, thumbs up, man. Great build. Overall, clean and well executed, and definitely a nice job, especially when it comes to, I think, being your first hard tubing there. James Carter is asking, any pricing information on the Loki? None that I can give you. So I don't want to give you a price and have it be incorrect. Generally, we don't disclose any of the pricing until we actually have what's called channel availability announcement. Once we have channel availability announcement, just like I did for the monitor today, I will actually release the pricing specific for those models. And also, if we have any specific kind of channel focus. And what I mean by that is if we're going to release it like Newegg, Amazon, or is it just going to be ASUS eStore and Amazon or anything along those lines, okay? So Thompson was asking what was used to make the bends. Probably you would use like a bending kit. So usually there's like kind of like a radius, and so you would then have a heat gun, and then you would actually heat up the PETG, or you would use whatever your actual tubing material is, and then you would just use the bending kit and you would bend it to that radius. Yeah. Glock ARR is actually any recommendations on a $300 budget. I would check out the VG probably 2.7 series, kind of probably the VG AQ model. I'll see if I can bring up a link, or if you want, you can tag me in the PCDIY group. At that price range, you can probably get either kind of like target in for going for the high refresh rate 1080p with a nice IPS-based display, or you can get kind of entry 1440p high refresh rate, but still pretty nice option. The main kind of offset that you would drop at around the $300 budget as opposed to maybe something a little bit higher is probably going to be in terms of peak brightness and also maybe ergonomic adjustment. But if you don't need a huge amount of ergonomic adjustment, it's okay to drop down to something like that within our TUF Gaming VG series. Crazy Legs is, I gave up bending tubes is a nightmare. Gave up custom loops, done it for years, too expensive. I definitely agree. I think that if you go water cooling, a lot of people, while the trend is definitely hardline, a simple, actually soft tubing is actually preferred. It's cheaper, it's simpler, it's better in terms of maintenance. It can still actually look really cool, and it doesn't carry the same amount of complexity, and you end up also being less costly. Yeah, so definitely, to each his own in that regard, but overall, very a nice, cool setup that we have there, right? And let me go ahead and see if I can just bring up that specific model that I was noting there in terms of that TUF VG. So let me just see here. I can bring that up for you, that monitor, and then we're going to get to our next build. And so I didn't actually have a full lineup of the monitors, builds that I wanted to be able to jump into today. So it's going to take me a little second to bring up maybe some of these. So hopefully I can do it fairly quickly. Yeah, I think here these are kind of the three. Oh, that's cool. They actually lowered the they have that one on promo. So let me show you right here. These would be kind of the three that I would check out when somebody was asking about the TUF Gaming monitor. So right here we've got, this is the VG27WQ. So this is going to be a 1440p, right? This one's actually a curved with a VA. Generally, I'm not usually initially recommend curve unless you specifically ask for curve, but I'm bringing it up in there because it is kind of around the price range that you talked about. If that's something you wanted, you're still going to get 1440p, 165 hertz, actually a higher brightness than standard. And some people like VA because of the contrast. I personally, like I said, unless you're in a gaming scenario where specifically know that you would kind of favor or benefit from a curve, I do recommend for most users adopting, considering a flat base display. So these would probably be my two primary recommendations that I would consider. So you can see this one's $289 right now, right? So right at your kind of budget. So this is the VG27AQ. This is a 1440p, 165 hertz, 1 millisecond, right? Very, very solid monitor design. I think this is a great option. This one right here would probably be, though, my preferred pick, which is the VG27AQ1A. It's a brighter base display, even a little bit higher refresh rate, formal G-Sync certification as well. And so this would be kind of my choice. We have one model that's above this, which is even a little bit of a brighter model, the AQ1L1A. But I think this is kind of a good choice if you're looking for a kind of monitor to upgrade and give you a really solid balance. And even if you actually spend some time to calibrate it, it can be quite color accurate too. So even if you want to have just like good for kind of secondary workflow, or you just want kind of a nice sRGB 100% experience, you can get a really solid color calibration out of this monitor too. So that would be my recommendation for you. Okay. All right. Very, very cool. Let's get ready to jump in with the next model right there. So Kevin Daly says, I agree with JJ. EK offers great industrial looking black soft tubing that is low maintenance. Yeah, 100%. If you're just looking for something that can still look clean, really easy to maintain, it's not super complicated, and you want to benefit, because water cooling definitely can give you a quieter and cooler experience. So it has its definite benefits. And to be honest, it can actually be pretty simple, because once you just get your block on there and you mount your block, you just got your tubing and you're going to go to a pump and res. It can be pretty streamlined, especially if you only want to do like what Jeremy did there and you just water cool the CPU. It's really not that bad, and the cost can be pretty similar. Like the Ryzen is a really cool looking unit, but at its price point, if you consider, you can get almost a similar kind of EK, or you can get, a cooling kit, Bits Power, some of the other companies out there that give you a full consolidated kit for a similar price band. And you're going to get the benefit of custom water cooling, right? Now, are you going to get a really cool stat screen? Are you going to get maybe RGB fans? Are you going to get kind of that really kind of nice cable? No, right? But if your focus is on water cooling, then, you can do it for about the same type of cost. So there are kind of definitely items to keep in mind there, right? All right. James Carter, how early do you send the Strix cards to EK for water block design? Actually, we don't have to send them cards. So when we're actually working with any of our partners, so we're working with Bits Power, we're working with Fantex, Thermaltake, EK, we actually work with them to send them boards, all of the actual board dimension information and the CAD information. So we can give them all of that and they can actually work to do that. Now there usually is sometimes going to be some additional kind of DVT, so design validation sampling that might occur. So there might be dummy PCBs and things that are done in terms of coordination, but we can work actually with block partners that once we finalize the PCB design and everything, we can share that information with them so that they can begin work on the development of the blocks. The timing is actually takes longer for them to actually go through the custom tooling and the design on their tooling side to be able to produce blocks than it is kind of being a limiting factor from the board partner to be able to provide them the designs, right? Unless, like I said, there's additional kind of design validation that you want to do with them. Ploy's asking, can you give us any pricing information? No pricing information on any GPUs. You'll have to make sure to keep it tuned in the not too distant future, right? Mike is asking, is there going to be a successor to the X570 Pro Ace motherboard, right? So so that's kind of interesting because the WS series is different than our ProArt series. So right now we don't have any immediate plans for a WS. We actually have discussed it with our team. The main difference is that, you know, what would be kind of the intended target. So right now, I think the main benefit if we did do a WS would be probably focusing on maybe having a little bit of a different PCI slot layout configuration. Now the current ProArt model already does have a different PCI slot layout than our other boards. So it has already been a little bit targeted towards giving you a little bit more flexibility for expansion support than you would have on some of the other motherboards, especially at maintaining higher PCIe slot configurations, right? But there is some kind of evaluation at how we have to look at what really the intended use case is and where the demand is. Right now, we don't have any plans to do an updated WS-based model, but that doesn't mean that we won't. I think right now we're just looking to kind of see what the feedback is from the community on whether or not there's really a demand to look to add another model, because right now we already have quite a number of boards within the X670 launch, right? And again, in our launch live stream that we'll have on the 26th, we're going to cover all the boards from top to bottom, and there's actually maybe even some boards that we haven't talked about under the series. So just make sure to go ahead and keep it tuned. We'll definitely be diving into all of the boards, all the details in that regard, but no immediate plans right now to add in a new WS-based SKU. All right, let me go ahead and see if I can get into our next one here. And I think this is our next build right here. Yeah, so this is going to be Avet, I believe, if this is the correct name, and Obatech. I think Obatech actually had a build that we featured last time too, so it's got a little bit of a back-to-back here. All right. And again, if you're always interested in submitting your build for the PCDIY Builder Spotlight, all you need to do is be part of our community and take a look at the featured post that we have. We have a submission form. You can just go ahead and drop your system into the submission form, upload your pictures, and you can be featured on the ASUS PCDIY live stream, as well as featured potentially on our social media channels. So it's a pretty cool opportunity to be able to showcase what you guys are doing with your ASUS hardware. And we definitely appreciate it because we'd love to be able to show off what you guys are doing with ASUS hardware. So let's go ahead and take a look at this build here. James is asking about availability. I can't comment on that, but rest assured we're committed to making sure that we can have you know, support for that, and we'll talk more about that on actual launch day. I know that might not be the perfect answer that you're looking for, but rest assured we'll be communicating information for you in that respect, okay? Dev Trend is saying, do you have a favorite ASUS motherboard? I've been with ASUS for almost about 15 years now, and almost since the beginning of ROG including. So when ROG literally had one motherboard, the first motherboard for ROG was the Crosshair motherboard. So I've also had the very lucky opportunity of working really closely with our design and development team, our PM team, and even having boards be based on feedback that I've given in terms of design and features and functions. So I've had over the years boards that are very personal to me because features and functions and recommendations or design implementations that I've wanted, I've actually been seen implemented onto motherboards. So when you ask me, do I have a favorite motherboard, it's really hard because you know, I have boards that from the Gene series helping to push for the concept of the Gene series, to -I models, to Formula models, to Hero models. I really almost look generation to generation, you know, but I think probably the Formula series is very, very close to me, because a lot of even the special kind of design refinements that I've wanted to get done on motherboards, we were able to do, and some of them took a really long time. One of the really coolest designs that we did on our Formula series was when we actually integrated metal into the actual polymer material for the plastic, and it created like this really cool kind of chrome diffused look effect on the motherboard. And that was in the we used it on both the Crosshair Formula and then on the Maximus Formula. Let me see if I can bring that up. I think that should be Maximus Formula. And that might be kind of maybe one of my favorites, but it still wouldn't be my favorite. I mean, every year I think, you know, we've continued to do an amazing job to kind of really kind of evolve the overall kind of look and feel of the boards. But this might be one of my favorites right here, this board, because like I said, the design was really kind of groundbreaking. It took us, I think, almost like 1.5 to 2 years to be able to work on the actual composite material to be able to create this really cool kind of chrome effect that when you don't have the board at all, it looks like chrome. And then, you know, when you add the lighting, it has a really kind of cool diffused lighting effect. But there's so many boards, from, like I said, Gene to Mini ITX to Black Edition boards to the Apex models, you know, even the Prime series, where I helped to work on getting, you know, White series being introduced on Prime. So too hard of a question. Sorry, I can't answer that. Let's go ahead and take a look at this build, because it's a very cool build. All right, so here we go. Ooh, right off the bat, this is looking nice. So this is going to be a vet, I believe, from Otabek. And we've got definitely an ROG base build here. So this is in a GX601. This is in a Helios. And then we've got another ROG Strix White Edition base graphics card, White Edition base power supply. This is the white and silver version of the GX601 Strix LC. Cooler in there, along with an ROG Strix motherboard. This is actually the newer motherboard design, so I can tell this is actually Z690. A cool little character there to add a little bit of flair, and then of course in that vertical mount configuration. Overall, very little complaint about it. I mean, this is nice, clean, well executed. It's a cool looking build in terms of the overall design aesthetic. I also like that looks like they didn't add RGB fans in this, because sometimes while it can look cool, it does take away from the cool kind of design that we have there in the front tempered glass. So I think that's pretty cool right there. So here we can see just a little bit more kind of the lighting design. You can see the cool little lighting design here. This was feedback that I helped to also work with our team on, where we had the dual accent design. So we had the RGB LED strip and then the RGB lighting that shined through there on the fans. And then a little bit more of a kind of a dynamic color scheme that we've got with a rainbow gradient, rainbow right there, and then a little bit of a gradient right there. But overall, very, very cool. Really nice job here in terms of the cable management. Very clean. It's all packed in there. Now this, I always have kind of I'm torn with. I think this is fantastic. It looks super clean, but me personally, when I do my cable management, I actually like to separate cables more. Personally, that's just my preference, because when then I'm trying to know where my cable is going to, whether that's going to go to like my fans or it's going to go to my graphics card or my motherboard, I like to separate them more, and that actually can look less clean because you're separating and you're going to have more kind of strands going in different spots. But that's my personal preference, as opposed to here kind of putting them all together. It looks really nice and tight and clean, and so I think a lot of people aesthetically prefer this, and it is simpler, but for me also a little bit maybe more challenging if I want to go in and kind of get into my cables. And here blacked out. So the blacked out I think is starting to look really cool. You're starting to get a little bit of that color scheme looking really bold and bright. And that's also, of course, one of the really cool things that you've got with the kind of the white color scheme that you have within the chassis, is that you get that light play coming off from the RGB. So that looks really, really cool. I like the way that that is going to be present and kind of shown off there. The also Royals, he's got G-Skill Royal dims in there, really kind of have that nice little pop because of that kind of iridescent kind of crystalline kind of diffusion that they have there on the top of the memory. So that's pretty cool, pretty nicely done. Crazy Leg says looks tidy, right? Minimal, as from Shin. Sorry if you're saying that. Dave Trent says, I would love to see a mini version of that case. So if you're talking about here the Helios, that would be kind of really tricky to make a mini version, but that's good feedback. Definitely something that we can talk about with our team. We are actually working on another bigger version, like a concept, kind of like more open framed version of the Helios. It'll be kind of the big brother of the Helios, but right now nothing small form factor in that regard. So we got a sense of unity is simple but beautiful. Very, very cool. Erica Cabrales throwing out there saying a nice with the little, I love that, with the little happy face right there. T. Walsh Still using an ASUS X99 Deluxe. It's still a great board with 5930K. Does everything I need and paired with an ASUS 1080 Strix. Man, you should submit that in for the PCDIY Builder Spotlight, man. Thank you so much, right? Kevin also gives us a little shout out. You sold me on the old Maximus 6 formula board in a YouTube video, which was my first ROG motherboard. Love the Formula Series 2, man. Thank you so much. If you guys don't know Kevin, he's had a couple of spotlights here. He has an amazing, really, really cool ROG setup, really almost from top to bottom, with ranging from monitors to peripherals to his whole system to even routers. Really cool, awesome setup. He's a great member of the community. So giving a little bit of another angle shot here, it looks really nice and clean and tidy. And again, he went with the stock fans, which is cool to see. Overall, this, I mean, nothing to complain about. It's clean, it's well executed. I don't think that there's anything I would change. I mean, you could argue that maybe you would try to get that little cable kind of maybe cleaned up just a smidge, maybe run through there, but I think the cable management's really nice. So I've got no complaints in there. I love this. Somebody just threw that in there just to have fun. He threw in the cables there just to show this is what the before was and then what the after was. But I think all of us know the pain, right, of trying to do your cable management, right? So overall, really, really cool in that regard. Let's go ahead and see what images we want to kind of maybe settle on in here. Maybe go couple different right there. Maybe go with let's go with 2 shots. I think that actually, hold on, I'm gonna resize that one manually. Let me go see if I can, because I think it looks pretty cool if maybe we do a little side by side like this. Yeah, I'm gonna go with this, although that little kind of secondary shot's pretty cool too. All right, let's go with this setup. I like this right here. Okay, so we'll bring it, go a little bit tighter right here, and we'll go a little bit tighter right there. So there we go. All right, so I think overall pretty cool look right there, guys. Let's go ahead and see what his submission form is like here. So this is again from Otabet. Hopefully I'm saying that correct there. So let's see. Does the build have a theme? Only ROG and white. What are 3 words that you would use to describe the build? Perfectionism, white edition, and power. Does the build have a name? Avet. In terms of the core hardware, we got an ROG STRIX Z690-A gaming Wi-Fi DDR4 version, an ROG STRIX 3080 white edition, an ROG STRIX LC360, the white edition, STRIX 850 white edition, and the Helios, the white edition. No budget was listed for the system. What aspect were they most proud of? Everything from ROG that he was able to go ahead and collect and then bring it all together, assembling it, of course, himself. So just the PCDIY experience, that was awesome. Anything he would change about the build? No. It's a really nice build, really clean, really well executed. I don't think there was anything I would change. I mean, it looks great. It's a high performance system, so there's not really any reason to kind of go change anything about. Took him a few hours to put the build all together. What's the system used for? He actually built this system for a client. And his favorite ASUS function or features, all the features, right? That there was all these kind of cool little different options. So I'm assuming everything from like ASUS IOC to, of course, Armory Crate to the UEFI options to fan calibration and profiling, all those cool stuff. But overall, man, very, very cool, man. Love the way that the overall build turned out. It's a really nice, well executed build. Okay. So Dave is like, I just like this case. Yeah, it's overall, it's a really cool case. I think the Helios still, even though it's been out for a while, the cool thing about it is that there's not a lot of things that look like it. You know, so I think that's one of the main benefits that the Helios brings to the table, is that it has kind of that cool distinctive design aesthetic, which is why I think so many ROG fans really like it. And I also like working in a big chassis. Sometimes working a really big chassis can be a little bit tricky because you want to make sure that it kind of feels filled out, right? But you know, that's the cool thing about the GX501, excuse me, the GT501 as well as the GX601. They're both kind of chassis that kind of give you a nice amount of space to be able to work in, right? All right. Oh, interesting. So we've got another Helios here. So almost kind of back to back here in terms of 2 Helios base builds. So this is going to be pretty interesting. This one is called Flawless White. So let's go ahead and take a look here at Flawless White. And it'll be interesting to see kind of how we feel about this Helios build compared to our other Helios. So Pushing Polygon says, I like the color of it a bit better. I hadn't had much of a chance to game on it though. Brightness isn't an issue. It does pop up. So I'm not sure. Are you talking about which monitor you might be wondering about there? So if you had a question on there, let us know. All right. I see some people asking about, of course, OLED. We do actually have our new ROG Swift OLEDs. We have the 42 and the 48-inch version. So if you know you're kind of interested in stepping up to that OLED experience, that is something that we do now offer. And even if you want OLED actually in the non kind of larger kind of large format based monitor, we also now have the the PA32 OLED, which is our ProArt series based monitor, which is not using a WOLED based panel, which is actually pretty cool if you really care about color accuracy and you don't care actually about how white can sometimes actually influence the output rendering performance, right, in certain scenarios, right? So there's some cool things, and I talked about that actually about that OLED monitor in one of our prior streams if you're interested in checking that out. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at this next display. This is flawless white, I believe, as I noted right here. Let me go ahead and bring up the images here. All right, let's see what we've got right here. Ooh, this is pretty cool setup. All right, so let's see here. This is looks like we got a full setup right here. So we got an ROG laptop, we've got an ROG Delta headset, we've got a cool little kind of keyboard mouse gaming setup with your controller there too, and then we've also got another Helios in there. And we can tell here, same thing, they haven't gone with the RGB fans up the front, which is pretty cool. So I'm overall digging the overall look and feel of the setup, pretty nice. And in here we got a little bit of a different shot. Really overall nice and cool. I'm digging this. Nothing to kind of complain about. This is always a little bit weird. I mean, it's cool that he's got, of course, the tray. And I think definitely going with a small kind of compact keyboard, something like our TKL or our Falchion would be a good choice right here, because you don't have as much space to be able to position and kind of make sure that you've got support right for your hands, right? You don't want to have kind of these weird prone positions that can sometimes be a concern. So overall, this works well. The only thing that I'm seeing immediately might just be maybe somebody might say that they want maybe combs on those, but overall the layout is done clean, and there's not any real concerns in terms of the overall kind of build right there. So let's go ahead and see as we get a little bit cleaner here. So they've got it well laid out. I mean, there's no other cables that you have to be concerned with. Everything is routed through well. They're using the pass-through right here. But I definitely would say some people would agree that maybe if you want to clean this up a little bit, maybe either just tighten it up. You don't even have to have combs. You could just use the Velcro and just kind of bring them all into a clean stand and kind of just wrap them up tightly. And that would look pretty clean. Almost think about it like kind of taking pasta and just kind of keeping it really nice and tight. That could be one option. But if you wanted to have it be a little bit cleaner, then of course you could get some combs, right? But overall, I mean, this is still really nicely laid out. I mean, all your other cables are routed really cleanly, really well. So I've got no kind of concerns or concerns in that regard, right? So overall, really clean and well executed. And this is all nice, bold, and bright. Again, very similar to the prior build that we had with almost a very similar type of component configuration, right? But you can see the difference in terms of the other build and this build in terms of some of maybe the cable management, right? Again here, very clean in terms of all your back cable management as well, so nothing to be concerned about there also. And here we've got the vertical mounting. So this is interesting right here because they had it in the horizontal mount. So again, the debate comes up. Do you guys like the horizontal mount or you like the vertical mount, right? So I'm always a fan, I think, of the vertical mount, of the horizontal mount over the vertical, but the vertical still looks good, right? Like, especially with this white card, you get that nice reflection. You get that RGB light strip there that's visible. So overall, looks nice. Let's go, I think, with the first. Let's see if we can do first picture here. Let me go back here. Sorry, actually, give me a second. Go back and get the side profile image here of each one of those, so I can go ahead and do that. This was flawless white, right? So I think he gave us two images, but we don't have one like exactly that shows off. I guess we can do it kind of like this. This is not perfect, guys, but maybe this gives us a little bit kind of a way to kind of see them, each one kind of shown off. Okay, yeah, I think that kind of works. So you can kind of see them too right there. You can see there the more horizontal where you get a little bit more of that kind of strong light bar. And I think if you had the combs cleaned up right here, that would look pretty clean. And again, you could go either over or under, right? And then here, of course, you've got that vertical mount, which I think, again, the vertical mount's not that it doesn't look good. And I think actually on the white, it might even be a little bit stronger because it's a little bit more reflective, right? But overall, they're both cool and a really nice, clean overall job in terms of the build, right? So let's go ahead and take a look here. So this is going to be from Evalio. Hopefully I'm saying that correct. So this is not their first build. So does the build have a theme? The build theme is pure white and keeping it clean as much as possible. The main priority is to keep each part in the system connected to each other, achieving the most out of the ASUS ROG aesthetic. Custom water cooling is not used because I like to change stuff really often, and I don't think you need to. I think it looks great without custom water cooling, and each one of the components has a really nice clean design. 3 words to describe the build was simple, classy, and majestic. I think overall those are 3 great words. The build's name is Flawless White. Core components here is an ROG STRIX Z590-A, 3080, 11900K. And then from there, let me just so see, he is also, you can see you got an RG6 power supply and a Helios chassis and a few other items that are also in there as well. It looks like he's got G-Skill Trident Z that he's running in there, about $3,000 without the peripherals in terms of the budget. What was he most proud of is the overall aesthetic, the balance between each component. Is there anything that they would change about the build? Maybe core components when they get older, but he feels the performance is overall pretty solid, so there's no reason to change anything out right now. How long did it take him to kind of put together everything? About a year, so I'm assuming that's kind of getting together all the parts and the money to be able to put together his whole system. He uses it only for gaming, so he likes to play Forza, Doom Eternal, Shadow of the Tomb Raider, GTA, all great games, very, very cool. And his overall favorite kind of ASUS function and feature is he's a big fan of actually Armory Crate. Allows us to have access to kind of a one-stop shop of being able to control everything from the fans to monitoring his system to enabling AIO clocking, even updating his drivers for his system if he needs to be able to do that, as well as, of course, the RGB lighting and control. He's also a really big fan of the way that the ROG design is present in terms of the components and how they kind of all come together and they look great together, man. Overall, man, you did a great job. I really like the way that your build turned out. It's clean, it's well executed. Like I said, about the only thing that you might want to keep in mind, maybe just tighten up that little cable right there, but otherwise, I think it turned out well. Yeah. Okay. All right, so that is going to be our flawless white build. Very, very cool. Let me go ahead and see if we have another build that I do have in the PCDIY Builder Spotlight. Give me 1 second here. Megatron Deception is keep us updated on the new adapter cable for the Thor power supplies. Yeah, I'll be keeping an announcement. And again, if you're part of the ASUS PCDIY group, there'll be a featured post announcement, but already our service and support team is working to coordinate those adapter cables. So we'll have an actual kind of notice that we'll put out internally to our service and support team once we filled up that kind of buffer, so that users that do currently have a Thor power supply or buying a Thor power supply that want the adapter cable can contact our services support team for that purpose. So we'll probably have a little bit more information that hopefully in about the next week or so. So again, just watch out for a featured announcement. And I'll probably, if that comes out within the next week, I'll be covering that in next week's stream. So don't worry about it. Rest assured, we will definitely be keeping you up to date when it comes to the adapter cable for any one of our Thor or ROG STRIX series power supplies. So Furry's saying is that there is any difference in cooling performance in vertical versus horizontal. There is. Traditionally, kind of horizontal is going to provide you with the best cooling performance, but vertical can generally offer pretty similar thermal performance, but you do have to kind of consider that depending on the spacing, when it's how close it may be up to the side panel, to that glass panel that you might have there, that can kind of create a little bit less airflow. And so that can cause an increase to the temperature performance. But if you have a reasonable amount of spacing, then you can have essentially very similar thermal performance and you shouldn't have any concerns. The other factor that you do have to keep in mind that when you do install a card vertically is you can cause obstructions. So you don't have access to things like maybe certain headers or M.2 slots or other things like that. So it's going to be a little bit more complicated sometimes where you might have to remove things. There can also be sometimes more tedious interoperability issues with a riser cable that don't exist when you have the card traditionally mounted. So overall, kind of the most streamlined experience is always going to be horizontal. But from an aesthetic perspective, some people like one way and other people like another. And I can tell you that we've worked very closely with our team over the last few generations to design our cards to work well in either scenario. So we do try to be kind of mindful of that from that perspective. Davain is asking, you probably can't tell us, but when can we hear about more of this open frame design case you mentioned? Actually, I can. You can see a concept version of it right now if you head over to the ROG Citadel. So the ROG Citadel is a free kind of game and application that we have available on Steam. It's not the latest version kind of renderings within the game that we have internally, but you can get a pretty good kind of design perspective of it already inside of Citadel. So if you kind of want to get a little bit of a design perspective from it, you can go ahead and check that out right there. But overall, it's very cool. Let me see if I can actually bring up the PCDIY groups post that I did there, where if I have it, I can kind of show you there. But ROG ATX, I did actually preview it a while back. Oh yeah, so one of our actually PGPCs, one of our friends from the group, he actually asked me about this chassis, even though I had already posted about it. But if you actually want to see, this is actually the image right here. So you'll see it actually has like this cool little X frame right there. It has a little bit of a display. You can see that there's a lot more kind of customized lighting. And you can kind of see this side profile. There's elements that do look similar to the kind of the Helios when you talk about the frame, but you'll see that it has a little bit more of this open kind of frame concept. You'll see that the spacing design is a little bit different. It has definitely more of an angular and kind of bold design. It's been really kind of designed for being a little even more aesthetically focused, and then also being kind of a little bit more centered for higher end kind of water cooled type builds, right? And you can see here that the kind of design is also favoring a little bit of kind of a split chamber kind of design, where you've had that kind of side mounting profile that you have available to you. So you can also see an example of that. And you can also see some kind of cool design kind of being influenced there on the side panel as well. So overall, pretty cool. You can see the under mounting right there for the PSU, which is also a bit different than it does work in terms of the Helios. So you'll definitely see that there's some similar aspects to the Helios, but it also definitely has some different elements than to the Helios. Okay. And again, if you want to kind of see that full little rendering, you can go inside of ROG Citadel and you can check it out. And we'll keep updating that over time. So if you're interested in doing that, you can definitely check it out that way. Somebody saying that is an aggressive design. Definitely it is an aggressive design, but you know, ROG, you know, it's about performance, it's about being edgy. We like to try to do things that different and look kind of cool. So I think it looks pretty interesting. I think it looks pretty unique, and I think that's one of the important things that we want to try to do, right? We don't necessarily always want to have something that looks just like every other kind of quote unquote chassis that might be out there, right? All right, let me go ahead and see if we have any other build left there that I have from last week's folder that I wanted to get to. If not, I think that will wrap things up. Oh no, I think I've got one right here. Okay, we've got one other build that we're gonna do right here. This is, I think, okay, this is Red Hell, guys. I don't believe I'd covered this one, so we're gonna go ahead and do this build. So give me 1 second here. And we'll load this one up here. All right. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look here and see what we've got with this build. All right, so here we're going kind of the other opposite end of the spectrum, right? So we went from kind of those really reflective and kind of bold and bright type of builds to here we're going to a black base build, which kind of absorbs a lot of colors, and you tend to get kind of a little bit more kind of hot spotting because of the way that kind of black doesn't necessarily have that same kind of reflective tendency, right? So it also add a little bit kind of this kind of more warm kind of vibe, because we're also got a lot of rich color in here in terms of the red working with the blacks. So we've got already, we can see a TUF Gaming and ROG STRIX board, Strix LC cooler that's in there, some cool kind of elements that are there. Pulling a little bit further back, okay, we're starting to see we got a pretty big build. So we've got can see some more fans that are in here. This is an interesting choice. You don't see this common, I'd say, on a standard AIO cooler, but they went with a push-pull fan configuration, which in reality, it's not really that, it's not needed on an AIO based configuration. And I would argue that you don't really get that much of a benefit from it. You can also actually, oddly enough, get sometimes a worse acoustic experience because you can cause more turbulence issues. But with that being said, you know, you're still going to get very good thermal performance from the fact that you've got 360 and then dual fans there, right? So as long as you got those all tuned up, that's going to be pretty interesting in that regard. So let's go ahead and see here. Here's a little bit of less of an angled shot where that lighting's not directly as bold out there. But I'm liking the colors. I'm liking this kind of like little bit of this pink kind of purple and a little bit of blue that's in there. It's kind of a little bit of a synthwave vibe. I think it's kind of cool. And I think there was a bigger shot. So yeah, let's go back over here. So here we can actually see the entirety of the system right there. So we actually have a kind of full large system, and looks like interesting. They've got look like a fan controller. We don't usually see fan controllers on builds too much here, but that's kind of cool in terms of just kind of seeing something a little bit out of the norm in terms of customization. You can see that you've got even more fans over here and then more fans down here in terms of the bottom chamber and the bottom cavity, right? And there's the kind of full shot of the entirety of our system. So we can see we've got a lot of fans that have been put into this build. Very kind of interesting little GPU brace too that's being used here. Okay, kind of cool. And then pulling out. That might be actually one of my favorite shots. Over there, I think you can see it's actually spaced out well. I got no issues. Some interesting things right here. If you guys didn't notice, this is actually a little addition that came with some of our motherboards. It's a small little ejection tool that we used to give you to be able to actually put in and eject your graphics card from the slot before we created the Q slot design, where you could go ahead and easily eject the graphics card. So that's overall an interesting little addition that they went ahead and just added in there to add a little bit more kind of ROG flair, right? But overall, very cool. I mean, it's got definitely kind of like this interesting kind of almost industrial, but a little bit kind of heavy feel to it, right? And I think that's partly because of the colors. You get the grading right here. You get that red, right? I'm always a fan of our ROG and red aesthetic. So when I get to see that in a build, it's nice to be able to kind of show it off there. Yeah, I like it. Let's go ahead and see right here what we have in terms of the submission form. So this is from Frederico. I'm not sure. Is that Federico? Excuse me, Federico. Why did I miss that? So Federico, he's sending in his build right here. So this is Red Hell by Federico. 3 words to describe the build is strength, organization, and enlightenment. Does the build have a name? It's Red Hell. In terms of the core components, we have an ROG STRIX Z590-E, a TUF Gaming 3070, an ROG STRIX LC2 360. Then he's got 32 gigabytes of memory that's overclocked at 4400 MT. He's got a 10900 KF at 5 gigahertz and then a 1000 watt power supply, and that's all inside of a Corsair 900 Obsidian D. So this is pretty rare. Normally with a really big chassis like this, you would see custom water cooling. So I think that's part of the reason why he spent a lot of time to kind of fill this out, because probably had he just gone with the standard just kind of single fan on there, not had these fans in there and not had any in there, it would seem kind of quite empty, right? So he, I think, needed to kind of fill out that space. And I think he did a pretty good job to kind of fill out the space visually so that it doesn't seem like it's necessarily super empty, and still kind of clean and well laid out in terms of it being managed. So thumbs up there in terms of kind of having that nicely done there. And also nice job on your overclocking. Some nice numbers in terms of your DRAM and your CPU. Be interesting to know if you actually used ASUS AIC, because you say you have 5 gigahertz all-core overclock, which is pretty nice, but definitely you're leaving some frequency on the floor without going with a per-core based overclock. What aspect of the build are they most proud of? Organization and the hardware balance. Is there anything they would change about the build? No. And then how long did it take them to build the system? About 2 weeks. The system is pretty much used for gaming and benchmarking. Days Gone, Battlefield 5, and Cyberpunk is some of the things that he's playing. And his favorite ASUS function or feature is he's absolutely a huge fan of ASUS motherboards in general in terms of their design and their features, as well as our ROG Strix series graphics cards, similarly for the same reason. Overall, pretty cool, man. You get a definite thumbs up from me. Pretty nicely done. Overall, pretty cool. All right. So I think that overall wraps up our ASUS PCDIY Builder Spotlight. I'm going to go ahead and see if we've got any kind of remaining questions that we might have here before we get ready to wrap up our stream. If not, as always, it's been cool to be able to go ahead and touch on things for you guys this week. Let me go ahead and see if we have anything. Okay, I don't think is there See anything? Hey, that came in right. Just make sure to keep it tuned. Like I said, anything in regards to kind of next generation based cards on what we may or may be doing in terms of even different design aesthetic, whether we're going to be having things like a white edition, definitely we'll make sure to keep you tuned as far as anything like that. Right now, no immediate plans to offer a white edition based model. But again, we definitely know that there's interest, right? We've now maintained the white edition for a couple of generations, right? And we went from kind of having it as a limited edition model to then having it as a formal based model within the 30 series, right? And so we know that there's definitely interest, especially because we're continuing to offer white chassis, white power supplies, white fans, white coolers, right? We have all these other items, so we know there's definite interest. Part of the balancing act, though, is also trying to figure out how to best design the shroud to complement that, right? If whether we use the same type of shroud or we make changes just because we have an entirely different shroud design. And it's important to keep in mind that when you talk about white, the white yield in terms of production is generally more challenging to produce anything in white. It doesn't generally have the same yield as something that's produced in a monochrome or kind of in a black color scheme. So it's more costly to produce, more challenging to produce, and there's more considerations that have to go into the production of a white based component than there is for a traditional kind of black component or a more monochrome type component. So we definitely know that there's kind of interest in that regard. Z790 make sure to keep it tuned. We'll have more information coming in the not too distant future, man. Rest assured. And if you're part of the ASUS PCDIY group, you'll find out about it as soon as we can post about it. All right. So with that, guys, take care, take it easy, enjoy the rest of your day. Have a great Friday night and have a safe and healthy weekend. And if you're building or upgrading, best of luck with your builds. Take care. Bye-bye.